In a small town on the outskirts of New Jersey, a boy named Daniel Rivera grew up. Daniel's parents worked tirelessly but could barely make ends meet. Despite financial difficulties, Daniel was always a curious and smart child. From an early age, he showed extraordinary ingenuity and dexterity, which often led him to various adventures. Daniel was the youngest of three children and was often neglected by his older brothers. He was not popular at school, but he was distinguished by good grades and an ability to solve complex problems. However, behind the mask of a diligent student was a boy who was fond of films about heists and adventures. One day, when Daniel was only 12, he accidentally came across an old comic book forgotten on a shelf in the local library. This comic was about a hero who brilliantly pulled off daring heists while remaining elusive. This comic made a lasting impression on Daniel, awakening in him dreams of a life full of adrenaline and risk. As a teenager, Daniel began to develop an interest in technology. He disassembled and reassembled old devices, trying to understand their operation. Over time, his skills became more sophisticated, and he began to apply his knowledge to riskier ventures. Stealing small items from local stores became a form of training for him. He didn't just steal. He carefully planned his every action, thinking through everything down to the smallest detail. Daniel didn't just want to be a criminal. He wanted to be the best of the best. He was inspired by stories of great robberies and cunning criminals. Each time he committed another theft, his skills and self-confidence only grew. He was not caught, and this added to his excitement. By the age of 18, he already knew that he was ready for something more. After leaving his hometown, Daniel moved to New York, a city of opportunity and temptation. Here he became part of the criminal underworld, first running small errands for local crime lords and then beginning to plan his own heists. In New York, Daniel quickly got used to it. His intelligence and natural caution helped him avoid trouble and earn trust among criminals. He studied the city, its streets and shops, observing how the security systems worked. Each new discovery brought him closer to his goal, to become an unsurpassed heist master. Daniel's first big business was with a small jewelry store in Manhattan. He carefully studied the store's operating hours, employee habits, and the location of surveillance cameras. Using his technical skills, he managed to hack the security system and disable the alarm for a few minutes. This was enough to carry out a lightning-fast robbery and escape with the loot. The success of this business brought Daniel not only money, but also a reputation. In the criminal circles of New York, they started talking about him as a young but very promising thief. Daniel continued to work alone, trusting no one and carefully concealing his identity. Every time he went on a case, he changed his appearance. He used wigs, disguises, and even fake documents. Over time, his appetites grew. He began planning robberies of larger, more secure targets. One of these was an upscale boutique on Fifth Avenue. This store was known for its exclusive products and high security. For this robbery, Daniel developed a complex plan that included not only hacking electronic systems, but also diversionary maneuvers. The robbery went perfectly. Daniel managed to break into the store, bypass all security systems, and take out more than $1 million worth of jewelry. After this case, he became a real legend among criminals. He was called Shadow for his ability to disappear without a trace. The New York police were at a loss, without a single lead that could lead to the capture of the daring thief. Each new robbery by Daniel became more and more sophisticated. He used technology and his knowledge of electronics to bypass the latest security systems. His elusiveness made owners of expensive stores tremble at the thought of a possible attack. Daniel enjoyed his life, believing that he was invincible. However, as his fame grew, so did the risks. The New York underworld was beginning to envy his success, and rivals began to appear on the horizon, wanting to overthrow the Shadow from his throne. Rumors about Daniel's incredible successes spread not only among criminals, but also among law enforcement agencies. The best detectives in New York began to investigate, trying to find at least some traces or errors that could lead them to the mysterious thief. Daniel, realizing that the pressure from the police was increasing, began to act even more carefully and thoughtfully. One day, having learned that the police were close to uncovering his methods, he decided to disappear from the radar for a while and go into the shadows. He changed his place of residence and got a regular job in order to divert suspicion from his person. Daniel used this time to develop new, even more complex methods of robbery. He improved his skills, studied the latest technologies, and found weaknesses in security systems. After some time, Daniel decided to return to his business. His next target was one of the most famous and guarded jewelry stores on Madison Avenue. This store was famous not only for its goods, but also for its impenetrable security systems. Preparations for this robbery took several months. Daniel collected information about every aspect of the store, including the security guard's schedules, the location of the cameras, and even the materials used to make the walls and doors. On the night of the robbery, Daniel acted as confidently and silently as always. He used the latest technology to bypass security systems and get inside. However, despite all his preparation, an unexpected surprise awaited him. There were additional security measures hidden in the store that Daniel was unaware of. This made his task much more difficult, but he did not back down. Showing all his ingenuity, he managed to cope with new obstacles and carry out the jewelry. The robbery was successfully completed, but it cost Daniel a lot of nerves. He realized that his methods were becoming outdated, and new technologies were beginning to be used against him. After this robbery, he decided to find a partner who would help him cope with new challenges. He was looking for a man who would share his passion for robbery and would be just as smart and careful. After much searching, he found Julia, a young and talented hacker with incredible cybersecurity skills. Julia was not only his partner but also became his friend whom he could trust. Now Daniel and Julia started working together. They developed new plans and improved their methods. Each new robbery became even more daring and complex. Their duo was invincible, and they continued to terrify the owners of expensive stores. Working together with Julia brought new opportunities and ideas to Daniel. Her cybersecurity abilities allowed them to hack into systems that previously seemed insurmountable. They developed an alarm system that allowed them to disable security devices remotely, leaving store owners in complete uncertainty. One day, preparing for one of the most ambitious robberies, Daniel and Julia chose as their target an elite boutique on Rockefeller Plaza. The boutique was famous for its unique jewelry, each of which cost a fortune. The pair began developing a detailed plan that included not only physical penetration, but also virtual penetration through the store's security systems and databases. The plan was simple in its genius. Julia used her skills to create false alarms, diverting the guards to the opposite side of town. This gave Daniel time to break into the store using fake IDs and access keys made by Julia. They also developed a sophisticated system to bypass security cameras by temporarily switching them to pre-recorded footage of empty rooms. At night, when the plan was put into action, everything went smoothly. Daniel and Julia worked together like a well-tuned machine. Daniel made his way inside the store and, following a well-thought-out route, disabled all remaining security systems. He filled the bag with jewelry, and by the time the guards realized what had happened, the couple had already disappeared without a trace. This robbery became their most successful case. The production exceeded all their expectations, and they became richer by several $1,000,000. However, this brought them even more attention from the police and competitors. Daniel knew that now they had to be even more careful not to fall into a trap. They decided to lay low for a while and carefully plan their further actions. Daniel and Julia moved to a new, safer location where they began working on new technologies and tactics. They knew that their next step would have to be even more daring and unpredictable in order to maintain a leading position in the criminal world. Despite the constant tension and risk, their partnership grew stronger. Daniel and Julia became not only colleagues but also true friends. Together they developed new plans, discussed strategy, and shared their dreams. Each new robbery became not only a test for them, but also an adventure in which they enjoyed every moment. They soon began to think about expanding their operations beyond New York. The world was full of rich stores and jewelry boutiques waiting to be robbed. Daniel and Julia planned to travel abroad and try their hand at other countries where their methods would be just as effective. Their plan for international activities began to take shape. Daniel and Julia decided to travel to Europe, where major cities such as Paris and London had some of the most luxurious and secure stores in the world. To do this, they needed to carefully prepare and acquire the necessary connections. Their first goal was Paris, the city of light and luxury. Daniel and Julia flew there under false names and began exploring local boutiques. They spent several weeks studying the opening hours, security routes, and security systems of the most expensive stores on the Champs-Élysées. The couple decided that their first target would be a famous jewelry house, famous for its exclusive jewelry. Preparation for this robbery took much more time and effort than all previous ones. Daniel and Julia realized that European security systems were different from those they had encountered in America. But this only fueled their interest and ambitions. Julia developed a complex scheme to hack digital locks and alarms, while Daniel thought through all possible escape routes and infiltration routes. Finally, the day of the robbery arrived. Daniel, dressed in a courier uniform, entered the building through the service entrance. At this time, Julia, sitting in a safe place, hacked into security systems, turning off cameras and alarms. Everything was going according to plan until one of the security guards accidentally noticed something strange in the operation of the video surveillance system. He raised the alarm and the store was instantly filled with security guards. But Daniel and Julia were ready for such a development of events. Daniel managed to hide in a secret vault, and Julia activated diversion programs that triggered false alarms throughout the city. This gave them time to develop a new escape plan. When the situation calmed down a little, Daniel took advantage of the moment to get out of the storage room with the loot and leave the building through a secret tunnel. They met at a pre-agreed location and quickly left Paris, leaving the police in confusion. This robbery was a real test for them, but also proof that their skills and cooperation can overcome any obstacles. Now that they have successfully tested their strength in Europe, new horizons have opened up before them. Daniel and Julia decided that their next destination would be London. They knew that no less interesting and complex tasks awaited them there. However, they were ready for new challenges. With each new robbery, their fame grew, and their methods became more sophisticated. The world of luxury and risk continued to beckon to them, promising new adventures and incredible rewards. After a successful heist in Paris, Daniel and Julia traveled to London. They carefully prepared for the move, providing themselves with new false documents and completely changing their appearance. A new challenge awaited them in London, a city with a powerful security system and a developed video surveillance network. At first, they behaved very carefully, studying the city and its features. They understood that London differs from New York and Paris, not only in architecture, but also in the level of security. Daniel and Julia spent several weeks exploring the shops on Bond Street, where the most expensive boutiques and jewelry houses were located. They paid special attention to the legendary jewelry house Harrods, which was famous for its exclusive jewelry and impenetrable security systems. Julia, using her hacking skills, managed to penetrate the Harrods database and collect all the necessary information about security systems, opening hours, and security routes. They developed a plan that included several stages: disabling external cameras, hacking the alarm system, and entering the main hall with jewelry. On the night of the robbery, everything went according to plan. Daniel entered the building through the roof using climbing equipment. Julia, from a safe distance, hacked systems and controlled cameras. Once Daniel was inside, he quickly and silently began collecting the jewelry, following a pre-planned route. However, suddenly, the alarm went off. This was due to an unexpected security update that they were unaware of. The whole plan was in jeopardy, and Daniel had to improvise. He managed to escape through one of the emergency exits while Julia distracted the guards, hacking into the city's power supply and causing a temporary blackout for several blocks. They met at a pre-agreed location, where they discussed what had happened and realized that their methods needed improvement. Despite the unforeseen circumstances, the robbery was successful and they received an impressive amount of loot. But the incident taught them that even the best-laid plans can run into unexpected difficulties. After London, Daniel and Julia decided to temporarily go into the shadows to analyze their mistakes and prepare for the next steps. They traveled to a small town in southern Spain where they began developing new technologies and strategies for future heists. Daniel became even more careful and thoughtful, and Julia focused on creating new programs for hacking security systems. Their next robbery was planned in Madrid, where one of the most guarded banks in Europe was located. Daniel and Julia knew this challenge would be their most challenging yet most rewarding undertaking. As time passed, they became more and more experienced and confident in their abilities, ready for any challenge that the world of criminal mastery could throw at them. In Madrid, Daniel and Julia spent several months carefully studying all aspects of the security of the chosen bank. This bank was famous for its high-security technologies and impenetrable safes. For a successful robbery, they needed to think through every step down to the smallest detail. Daniel and Julia hatched a plan that involved hacking into the bank's computer systems, creating a diversion, and breaking into the main vault. Julia began by exploring the banking network, finding vulnerabilities, and creating fake accounts to access the system. She also developed a special virus that was supposed to disable all surveillance cameras and alarms during the robbery. At the same time, Daniel worked on the physical part of the plan. He studied security routes, employee work schedules, and the location of all motion sensors. They rented an apartment near the bank, where they stored all the necessary equipment and materials for hacking. The day of the robbery arrived. Daniel and Julia were extremely focused and confident in their abilities. On the night of the operation, Julia, while in her apartment, activated the virus and began to control the bank system. Daniel, using forged documents, entered the bank under the guise of a technician called to fix a non-existent problem. Once Daniel was inside, he followed a pre-planned route, avoiding all the sensors and cameras that Julia had disabled. He reached the main vault and began to hack into a complex electronic lock, which, according to their calculations, should have been disabled for the duration of the virus. Everything was going according to plan, but suddenly the security system rebooted, activating backup protocols. The bank began to panic, and the guards rushed to the vault. Julia quickly realized what had happened and activated the second phase of the virus, causing false alarms in other parts of the city. This distracted some of the guards, but Daniel still had to act quickly. He managed to open the vault and take the jewelry and money, but his escape route was blocked. Using his skills and ingenuity, Daniel managed to escape through the ventilation system, walking across the rooftops of nearby buildings and avoiding the guards. Julia coordinated his actions, providing information in real time. Finally, they met at a pre-agreed place and disappeared with the loot. The robbery in Madrid became their most daring and successful case. They got a huge haul and proved to themselves that they can handle any challenge. However, this robbery attracted the attention of international law enforcement agencies. Daniel and Julia realized that they needed to temporarily stop their activities and lay low. They went to South America, where they decided to relax and carefully consider their next steps. Their time in Madrid taught them a lot. They became even more careful and inventive. Realizing that their methods must constantly improve, Daniel and Julia began to develop new technologies and strategies for future heists. New adventures and new challenges awaited them, but they were ready for them. The world of crime remained exciting and full of opportunities for them, and Daniel and Julia were not going to stop there. While in South America, Daniel and Julia chose Brazil as their temporary base. With its beauty and chaotic atmosphere, Rio de Janeiro has become the perfect place to get lost and explore new things at the same time. Here, they continued to develop their skills and look for ways to improve their methods. Several months passed, and Daniel and Julia began planning their next big heist. Their attention was drawn to a famous jewelry store in the city center, famous for its expensive and rare jewelry. The store was protected by one of the most advanced security systems in South America, making it an ideal target for their next test. They spent weeks studying work schedules, guard routes, and the store's security systems. Julia found a weak spot in the store's network security that they could exploit to access the cameras and alarms. They developed a complex plan that included using drones to create a distraction and create false alarms in different parts of the city. On the night of the robbery, everything was ready. Daniel and Julia started by flying drones, creating chaos and distracting the police and security. Julia hacked the store's security systems, disabling the cameras and alarms long enough to gain entry. Daniel, using a laser cutter, carefully penetrated the roof of the building, avoiding motion sensors. When Daniel reached the main treasure room, he quickly collected the most valuable items. However, their plan again encountered unexpected problems. Suddenly, a new security system they didn't know about was activated. The store was instantly filled with security, and Daniel had to improvise. He used smoke grenades and laser traps to slow down the guards and managed to escape through the ventilation shafts. Julia, being in a safe place, coordinated his actions and distracted the attention of the guards by hacking into city control systems. They met at a pre-agreed place and escaped with the loot, once again proving their elusiveness and skill. A robbery in Rio de Janeiro brought even more attention to their activities. International law enforcement agencies are hunting a mysterious couple known for their daring, high-tech robberies. Daniel and Julia knew they needed to be even more careful and thoughtful. They decided to temporarily cease their activities and move to Asia, where they began to explore new targets and improve their technology. In Hong Kong, they found new opportunities for growth and development by studying local security systems and developing new hacking techniques. New adventures and challenges awaited them, but Daniel and Julia were ready for them. The world of crime remained exciting and full of opportunities for them, and they were not going to stop there. In Hong Kong, Daniel and Julia find themselves in a world where high technology and tradition are closely intertwined. This city became an ideal place for them to hide, and at the same time a new field for research. They rented a luxurious penthouse overlooking Victoria Harbor from where they could plan their operations without attracting too much attention. They soon discovered that Hong Kong was home to one of the richest collections of jewelry in the world, owned by a major tycoon named Wong Li. His collection was known not only for its value, but also for its uniqueness. It was kept in a private gallery, protected by the latest security systems developed by the best security specialists. Daniel and Julia began carefully planning the robbery. They knew that this time they would have to face levels of defense that they had never encountered before. Julia began studying gallery cybersecurity, and Daniel began studying physical security. They decided to use their old drone trick, but this time improved their software and added network hacking capabilities. The preparation took several months. They embedded their programs into the gallery's security system and also created several false objects to distract attention. On the night of the robbery, using fake IDs and drones, they began the operation. Everything was going according to plan until one of the guards accidentally noticed the unusual behavior of the drones. The alarm was raised and Daniel and Julia had to act quickly. Daniel made his way inside the gallery, using his skills and advanced gadgets to bypass the security systems. At this time, Julia distracted the attention of the guards, hacking the city's control systems and creating chaos on the streets. When Daniel reached the main collection hall, he began collecting the most valuable exhibits. However, a system that they had not foreseen was suddenly activated, laser traps that began to work automatically. Daniel had to show all his dexterity and ingenuity to avoid traps and get out of the building. They met on the roof of a nearby building where a helicopter, rented under false names, was waiting for them. At the last moment, when the guards were already close, they managed to take off and disappear into the night sky. The robbery was successful, but Daniel and Julia knew they were on the verge of exposure. Now they are being pursued not only by local authorities, but also by international agencies trying to catch the elusive couple. After the robbery in Hong Kong, they decided to go even deeper into the shadows. Their next target was Dubai, a city known for its wealthy residents and incredible levels of security. In Dubai, they began exploring new techniques, including using artificial intelligence and machine learning to hack systems. New challenges and adventures awaited them, but they were ready for them. The world of crime continued to beckon to them, promising new challenges and incredible rewards. In Dubai, a city of luxury and incredible technology, Daniel and Julia faced a whole new level of security. Here, among the skyscrapers and modern architectural marvels, they planned their next big heist. Their target was a legendary jewelry store in the heart of the city, known for its exclusive collection of rare jewelry. Daniel and Julia began by studying the city's infrastructure, security, and video surveillance systems. They knew that Dubai had one of the most sophisticated security systems in the world, so they decided to use their most advanced technologies and approaches. Julia began hacking networks and analyzing data, while Daniel developed an infiltration and evacuation strategy. Their plan included several stages. First, they decided to use a network of underground tunnels that were part of the city's old engineering structures. These tunnels led directly to the building where the jewelry store was located. Secondly, they developed a unique algorithm that made it possible to hack video surveillance systems and replace them with images recorded in advance. On the night of the robbery, Daniel and Julia set about executing the plan. Daniel, dressed in a maintenance uniform, entered the building through an underground tunnel that they had prepared in advance. At this time, Julia, being in a secluded place, hacked into security systems and turned off the alarm. They used the latest technology, including drones and unmanned vehicles, to distract guards and create false alarms. Once Daniel was inside the store, he quickly and carefully began collecting the jewelry. Everything was going according to plan until a new security system based on biometric scanning was activated. It turned out that the jewelry store updated their security system just days before the robbery, and this information was not available in their original data. Daniel had to improvise. He used a special device developed by Julia to break the biometric lock. It took longer than they expected, and the guards began to approach. Julia, seeing the situation, created a fake message about a fire in one of the neighboring buildings to distract attention and give Daniel more time. Finally, Daniel managed to open the lock and collect the most valuable jewelry. They escaped the building through the same underground tunnel they used to enter. The robbery was successful, but very tense. Daniel and Julia realized that their methods needed constant updating and improvement. After a successful robbery in Dubai, they decided to hide and relax for a while. They went to a small island in the Caribbean, where they were able to enjoy peace and tranquility, and also analyze their mistakes and achievements. On the island, they began to develop new devices and technologies that would help them in the future. Their next target was Singapore, a city known for its high technology and advanced security systems. Daniel and Julia knew that new challenges awaited them here, but they were ready for them. The world of crime continued to beckon them, promising new adventures and incredible rewards. In Singapore, Daniel and Julia find themselves in a city where technology and security have reached their zenith. Here, among the state-of-the-art skyscrapers and perfectly laid-out streets, they began plotting their next big heist. Their target was a famous jewelry store located in one of the most prestigious areas of the city. They began by carefully examining the store's security system, which included biometric scanners, thermal imaging cameras, and sophisticated artificial intelligence algorithms that analyze behavior. Julia used her skills to find vulnerabilities in the store's networks and infiltrate their systems, while Daniel did physical reconnaissance, analyzing guard locations and patrol routes. Their plan included using the latest technology and hacking techniques they had developed in the Caribbean. Daniel and Julia were confident in their abilities, but they did not take into account one important factor. In Singapore, there was a special group for combating high-tech crimes, which had been monitoring their activities for a long time. On the night of the robbery, everything started according to plan. Daniel entered the building through the ventilation system, and Julia hacked the security systems, creating false alarms and diverting the attention of the guards. They used drones and unmanned vehicles to monitor the situation outside and inside the building. However, as soon as Daniel approached the main treasure vault, the security system suddenly rebooted. Julia tried to regain control, but it turned out that the Special Crime Control Group was ready for their methods and introduced their own countermeasures. As a result, Daniel was trapped and Julia lost contact with him. Security and the special team began to approach the vault, and Daniel had very little time left. He used all his skills and ingenuity to bypass the extra security measures and open the vault. However, as he began to collect the jewelry, the vault door suddenly locked, trapping him inside. Julia, realizing the seriousness of the situation, decided to take extreme measures. She hacked into the city's power supply network and caused a temporary power outage in the area where the store was located. This gave Daniel some time to get out of the vault and find an escape route, but the special group was already on his trail. Daniel had to use his parkour and stealth skills to avoid capture. He left the building through the service entrance and, hiding in the shadows, went to the meeting place with Julia. They quickly left Singapore, leaving behind a trail of rubble and unsolved mysteries. This failure became an important lesson for them. Daniel and Julia realized they needed to be even more careful and thoughtful. They decided to go underground for a while and reconsider their methods. Their time in Singapore taught them a lot, and they were determined to use this experience for future success. Hiding on one of the sparsely populated islands of Indonesia, Daniel and Julia began to develop new strategies and technologies. They knew the next challenge would be even more difficult, but they were ready for it. The world of crime continued to beckon them, promising new adventures and incredible rewards. Singapore left its mark on Daniel and Julia, forcing them to rethink their approaches and strategies. This time, they decided to change tactics and act with more caution and cunning. Indonesia gave them the opportunity to hide and carefully consider their next move. They chose a small island, lost among many others, for their base. Here, away from prying eyes, they began to develop new technologies and methods that were supposed to ensure their success in the future. Julia focused on creating more sophisticated and powerful hacking programs, while Daniel trained in new methods of infiltration and camouflage. Their next destination was Hong Kong. The city, known for its density and technological advancements, provided an ideal environment for complex operations. Daniel and Julia started by renting a small apartment overlooking the city, from where they could observe their next target, the famous Dragon's Pearl jewelry store. This time, they decided to act more carefully. Daniel took on the role of a regular worker, taking a temporary job at the store. This allowed him to study the internal processes and location of security systems from the inside. Julia, for her part, penetrated the store's digital infrastructure, collecting all the necessary information and preparing the systems for hacking. Every evening they met in their apartment, exchanging information received and adjusting the plan. They decided that this time they would use not only technology, but also the human factor. Daniel befriended several of the store's employees, extracting useful details from them and lulling them into a false sense of security. Finally, the day of the robbery arrived. Julia hacked the alarm system, disabling the cameras and creating the illusion that everything was fine. Daniel, taking advantage of his position, entered the vault and began collecting the most valuable jewelry. Everything was going according to plan, but suddenly one of the employees he trusted noticed something was wrong and raised the alarm. The situation became critical. Daniel was trapped and the guards were heading towards him. Julia, watching what was happening through the cameras, realized that she needed to act quickly. She activated a backup plan, calling a fake fire alarm in a nearby building, which distracted the guards and allowed Daniel to escape from the vault. They met on the roof of the building from which they were planning to escape. Daniel was on edge, but Julia remained calm and confident. Together, they went down the fire escape and disappeared into the alleys of Hong Kong, leaving the police and security guards at a loss. This operation showed them that they can overcome any challenge if they work together and rely on their skills and ingenuity. Daniel and Julia decided that they would stop their activities for a while and travel to Japan, where they would continue their research and development. Hong Kong became for them not just another city, but an important lesson that taught them to be even more careful and prudent. The world of crime remained full of opportunity, and Daniel and Julia were ready to take on any challenge it presented to them. Daniel and Julia, after a successful operation in Hong Kong and a well-deserved holiday in Japan, turned their attention to Europe. High on their list of priority targets was Ukraine, a country with a rich history and culture, but also a developing economy and high levels of corruption. This could work to their advantage. Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, became their next destination. The city, with its magnificent architecture and modern shopping malls, provided them with plenty of targets to rob. Their attention was attracted by the elite jewelry store Zolotaya Korona, located in the heart of the city on Kreshchatik. The store was famous for its exclusive jewelry and antiques. To prepare, they rented an apartment in the center of Kyiv, from where they could observe the store and its surroundings. Daniel began doing reconnaissance, visiting the store under the guise of a wealthy client and studying all the security details. He found out that the store was guarded not only by modern technology, but also by a private security company with a good reputation. Julia, meanwhile, was penetrating the store's digital infrastructure. She hacked into their systems, studied the guards' work schedules, and collected information about all employees. She also implemented several of her programs to create false alarms and distractions. Their plan was complex and multi-stage. First, they decided to exploit a vulnerability in the area's power supply to cause a temporary blackout. Secondly, they developed an infiltration scheme using underground communications left over from Soviet times. The night of the robbery has arrived. Daniel and Julia were extremely focused. Julia activated her programs, causing false alarms in several nearby buildings and cutting off power in the area of the store. Daniel, dressed in a black jumpsuit, made his way through underground communications and ended up in the basement of the store. Everything was going according to plan until a backup security system they didn't know about was activated. The store was instantly filled with security guards and the alarm began to work offline. Daniel was trapped, but Julia was not at a loss. She quickly hacked into the backup system and caused another series of false alarms, giving Daniel a few minutes to complete the operation. He collected the most valuable jewelry and antiques, but the exit was blocked by guards. Julia activated the drones, which began to create chaos outside, diverting the attention of the guards. Daniel used this moment to climb out the window onto the roof of a nearby building. They met in a pre-prepared car and quickly left the crime scene. The Kiev robbery did not go as smoothly as planned, but they still achieved their goal. Daniel and Julia realized that Ukraine presented them with a new level of challenges and opportunities. After that, they decided to lay low for a while in one of the small cities in western Ukraine in order to analyze what happened and prepare for new operations. Their next step was full of unknowns, but they were ready for new challenges and adventures that could await them in the world of crime. After a successful but tense heist in Kyiv, Daniel and Julia decided to move to the south of Ukraine, to the port city of Odessa. Odessa, with its rich cultural traditions and vibrant atmosphere, seemed like the perfect place for our next venture. The city was known for its historic buildings, luxury shops, and hidden wealth, making it an attractive target for the next heist. They chose as their target the famous jewelry store Black Sea Star, located in the historical center of the city, not far from the Potemkin Stairs. This store was famous for its exclusive jewelry and expensive watches. Their main task was to enter the store and take out the most valuable things without attracting attention. To begin with, they rented an apartment overlooking Deribasovskaya Street, from where they could observe the store and its surroundings. Daniel began visiting the store, posing as a wealthy foreigner interested in unique jewelry to study the security systems and camera locations. He learned that the store was guarded by a private security company and had a sophisticated alarm system. Julia, in turn, began hacking into the store's digital infrastructure, gaining access to their internal systems and studying weaknesses. She discovered that the alarm system had a vulnerability that allowed it to be disabled for a short period of time without attracting attention. Their plan included several stages. First, Julia had to hack the alarm system and disable the security cameras. Secondly, Daniel had to enter the store through the back door, which they had prepared in advance, and collect all the valuable items. Thirdly, they had to escape without leaving a trace. The night of the robbery was full of tension. Julia activated her programs and disabled the store's security systems. Daniel, dressed in a black jumpsuit, entered through the back door and began collecting jewelry and expensive watches. Everything was going according to plan until an unexpected failure occurred in the system. One of the guards accidentally discovered that the cameras were not working and raised the alarm. The situation became critical. Julia quickly hacked into the city's lighting system, causing a temporary blackout in the area around the store. This gave Daniel a few minutes to complete the operation and escape through the underground communications that they had explored in advance. They met at a pre-agreed location and quickly left the city center, heading towards the port. Daniel and Julia knew that they might have more problems in Odessa due to the activity of local criminal groups and the police, so they decided to leave the city as soon as possible. They used a pre-prepared ship to leave Odessa and hide on the open sea. The operation taught them an important lesson, showing them that even the best-laid plans can run into unexpected problems. They decided to go to Romania, where they planned to hide and prepare for new challenges. Daniel and Julia were determined to continue their criminal adventures, despite all the difficulties that might come their way. The world of crime remained exciting and full of possibilities, and they had no intention of stopping there. Daniel and Julia, having disappeared into the open sea after a daring robbery in Odessa, headed to the shores of Romania. Their route took them through the Black Sea, and they hoped that sailing would help them avoid the attention of both Ukrainian and Romanian authorities. Arriving in Romania, they found refuge in a small coastal town known for its labyrinthine ancient streets and safety for fugitives. The Romanian coastal town became their temporary base. Here they rented a modest house on the outskirts where they could calmly review their past operations and prepare for new challenges. The Odessa operation had taught them a lot, and they decided that their next steps would need to be more thoughtful and sophisticated. They chose a famous jewelry house in Bucharest as their next target. It was one of the most guarded and prestigious stores in Romania, famous for its unique jewelry and antiques. Daniel and Julia began their preparation by carefully studying the store, its security and security systems. Daniel again used his method of infiltrating under the guise of a client. He visited the store several times, pretending to be a wealthy collector interested in antique jewelry. This allowed him to study the location of the cells, the work schedule of employees and security guards. Julia, meanwhile, hacked their security systems, gaining access to building plans and security patrol schedules. They developed a complex plan involving distractions and the use of false documents. First of all, they decided to create a false alarm in another area of the city in order to distract part of the guards. Then, using fake passes, Daniel had to infiltrate the building and collect the most valuable items while Julia controlled the security systems and cameras. The day of the operation arrived. Julia triggered a false alarm, causing chaos in another part of the city. The police and part of the security were distracted, which gave them the necessary time. Daniel, using fake passes, entered the building and began collecting jewelry. Everything went according to plan until one of the employees noticed the fake documents and raised the alarm. The situation got out of control again. Julia quickly hacked into the building's control system, blocking the exits and disabling the alarm. This gave Daniel a few extra minutes to complete the operation. He collected the most valuable things and headed to the exit, where Julia was already waiting for him in a car. They managed to escape before the police and security arrived. The robbery in Bucharest was successful, but tensions grew. Daniel and Julia realized that with each new case they were attracting more and more attention from international law enforcement agencies. After the robbery, they decided to leave Romania and head to Central Europe. Their next destination was Budapest, a city with a rich history and many luxury shops. They knew that a new level of challenges and opportunities awaited them here, but they were ready for them. In Budapest, they began by exploring the city and choosing their next target. Daniel and Julia were determined to continue their criminal adventures, despite all the difficulties and dangers that might come their way. The world of crime remained exciting and full of possibilities, and they had no intention of stopping there. Daniel and Julia arrived in Budapest under cover of darkness, choosing a small apartment in a quiet area of the city for their hideout. The ancient streets and majestic buildings provided them with the opportunity to remain invisible and explore the surroundings at the same time. Budapest became for them a new field for research and preparation for the next case. They chose as their target the famous jewelry store St. Stephen's Crown, located in the city center near the Danube. This store was known for its exclusive jewelry and antiques, as well as high security measures. Daniel and Julia began by carefully reviewing the store's security systems and security schedules. Daniel again used his usual tactics. He began visiting the store under the guise of a wealthy collector interested in unique jewelry. This allowed him to study the internal layout of the building, the location of cameras and guards. Julia, meanwhile, hacked into the store's security systems, gaining access to their internal data and building plans. Their plan included several key steps. First, they decided to use diversionary maneuvers to divert the attention of security and police. Secondly, Daniel had to enter the building through the back door, which they had prepared in advance, and collect all the valuable items. Third, Julia monitored the alarm system and cameras to ensure safe exit. The night of the robbery was full of tension. Julia activated her programs, causing false alarms in different parts of the city. The police and security were distracted, giving Daniel the time he needed. He entered the building through the back door and began collecting jewelry and antiques. Everything went according to plan until an additional security system, which they did not know about, went off. The situation became critical. Julia quickly hacked into the city's control system, causing a temporary power outage in the area around the store. This gave Daniel a few minutes to complete the operation and escape through a prepared exit. They met at a pre-agreed location and quickly left the city center. After a successful robbery in Budapest, they decided to temporarily hide in Austria. In the Vienna woods, in a small house, they found refuge where they could calmly analyze their past actions and prepare for new challenges. The operation in Budapest showed them that their methods needed constant updating and improvement. They decided that their next step would be Vienna, a city rich in history and culture. Daniel and Julia knew that new challenges and opportunities awaited them in Vienna, but they were ready for them. The world of crime continued to beckon them, promising new adventures and incredible rewards. In Vienna, among the majestic palaces and rich museums, Daniel and Julia decided to carry out the most daring and dangerous robbery of their criminal career. Their goal was the legendary Kunstkamera Museum, known for its priceless collections of jewelry, works of art, and rare artifacts. This museum was guarded by one of the most advanced security systems in the world, making their plan even riskier, but also potentially more lucrative. They spent months preparing. Daniel and Julia studied every detail of the museum, from the location of the cameras to the routes of the guards. Julia hacked into the museum's internal management systems, gaining access to building plans and security schedules. They knew that any mistake could cost them not only their freedom, but also their lives. Their plan was thought out in detail and included several stages. First, they decided to use a diversion by causing a false alarm in another part of the city. Secondly, Julia hacked the museum's management system, temporarily disabling the cameras and alarms. Thirdly, Daniel entered the building through the ventilation shaft, which they had prepared in advance, and collected the most valuable exhibits. The night of the robbery arrived. Julia, being in a safe place, activated her programs and caused a false alarm in another area of Vienna. The police and part of the security were distracted, which gave them the necessary time. Daniel, dressed in a black jumpsuit and equipped with the latest gadgets, entered the building through the ventilation shaft and began his journey to the main hall with the jewels. Everything was going according to plan until a backup security system they didn't know about went off. Autonomous laser traps and motion sensors began operating in the museum. Daniel had to show all his dexterity and ingenuity to avoid traps and get to the goal. Julia, seeing what was happening through the cameras, tried to hack into the backup system to help Daniel. After tense minutes that seemed like an eternity, Daniel finally reached the main hall. He quickly collected the most valuable items, including rare jewelry and works of art. However, the exit was blocked by security, who began to return after a false alarm. Julia activated the drones, which began to create chaos outside, diverting the attention of the guards. Daniel used this moment to climb out through the ventilation shaft and meet Julia at a pre-agreed location. They managed to leave Vienna without leaving a trace and disappeared into the suburbs where they had prepared a safe shelter in advance. Their production turned out to be one of the largest in history. They stole jewelry and works of art worth approximately 200 million euros. This robbery was a real triumph for Daniel and Julia, proving their skill and ingenuity. However, they understood that now they would be hunted not only by the police, but also by international organizations involved in the protection of cultural heritage. They decided to hide and lie low for a while to analyze their actions and prepare for new challenges. Their next adventure promised to be no less exciting and dangerous, but they were ready for it. The world of crime remained full of opportunity and risk, and Daniel and Julia were not going to stop there. After a daring robbery in Vienna, Daniel and Julia hid in one of the small village houses on the outskirts of Austria. They carefully thought out their route of retreat and change of shelters in order to confuse their tracks and avoid persecution. Realizing that their actions had attracted the attention of international law enforcement agencies, they decided to lay low for a while and develop new precautions. International police and cultural heritage agencies were determined to find the elusive couple. They began a large-scale investigation, using all available technology and resources. In every major city in Europe, Additional patrols were installed and security measures were strengthened in museums and shops. However, despite their best efforts, Daniel and Julia remained out of reach. Daniel and Julia were prepared for this turn of events. They used fake documents, changed their appearance, and carefully selected hiding places. Whenever they felt they might be discovered, they quickly changed locations, avoiding staying in one place for too long. They also used sophisticated encryption and anonymization techniques to remain invisible in the digital world. Despite the best efforts of the police, their attempts to find Daniel and Julia were unsuccessful. Each new place where the couple stayed was carefully thought out and prepared. They used abandoned buildings, remote village houses, and even underground hideouts to avoid detection. Meanwhile, Daniel and Julia weren't sitting idle. They continued to develop new technologies and techniques that could help them in future heists. Their next task would be even more daring and complex, but they were confident in their abilities. Time passed and they began to plan a new robbery. This time their target was the famous museum in Amsterdam, known for its unique collections and sophisticated security systems. Daniel and Julia knew that this case would be the most difficult and risky they had ever planned, but this only fueled their excitement. They carefully studied the museum, its security systems, and patrol routes. Julia hacked into the museum's internal networks, gaining access to building plans and security schedules. Daniel, in turn, studied physical security and planned infiltration and evacuation routes. Their plan included several stages. First, they decided to use diversionary maneuvers to divert the attention of security and police. Secondly, Julia hacked the museum's management system, temporarily disabling the cameras and alarms. Thirdly, Daniel had to enter the building through a secret passage, which they had prepared in advance, and collect the most valuable exhibits. The night of the robbery arrived. Daniel and Julia were extremely focused. Julia activated her programs, causing false alarms in different parts of the city. The police and part of the security were distracted, which gave them the necessary time. Daniel, dressed in a black jumpsuit and equipped with the latest gadgets, entered the building through a secret passage and began his journey to the main hall with the jewels. Everything was going according to plan until a backup security system they didn't know about went off. Autonomous laser traps and motion sensors began operating in the museum. Daniel had to show all his dexterity and ingenuity to avoid traps and get to the goal. Julia, seeing what was happening through the cameras, tried to hack into the backup system to help Daniel. After tense minutes that seemed like an eternity, Daniel finally reached the main hall. He quickly collected the most valuable items, including rare jewelry and works of art. However, the exit was blocked by security, who began to return after a false alarm. Julia activated the drones, which began to create chaos outside, diverting the attention of the guards. Daniel used this moment to sneak out through the secret passage and meet Julia at a pre-agreed location. They managed to leave Amsterdam without leaving any traces and disappeared into the suburbs, where they had prepared a safe shelter in advance. They were able to steal exhibits worth about 300 million euros. This robbery was a real triumph for Daniel and Julia, proving their skill and ingenuity. However, they understood that now they would be hunted not only by the police, but also by international organizations involved in the protection of cultural heritage. After a daring robbery in Amsterdam, Daniel and Julia decided to disappear from view for a while. They took refuge in a small village house on the outskirts of Switzerland, among the snow-capped Alps, where they could calmly discuss their next steps. The Amsterdam robbery brought them a huge amount of money, but also attracted the attention of international law enforcement agencies. The police, Interpol, special agents were all hunting them, hoping to catch this elusive couple. But Daniel and Julia were always one step ahead. Switzerland provided them with temporary shelter, but they understood that they could not stay here for long. It was time to think about the next step. This time they chose not just an object but an entire country. Their new goal was Monaco, a principality known for its luxury casinos and richest inhabitants. Monaco is a different matter. Security here is at the highest level, and every square meter of the city is under surveillance. But that didn't stop Daniel and Julia. On the contrary, the more difficult the task, the more they were attracted to it. They began planning a robbery that would be the culmination of their criminal careers. They first explored Monaco remotely. Julia hacked into databases, studying security schedules and security systems for casinos and jewelry stores. Daniel worked on the physical aspects: how to get in, how to get out, how to create a distraction. They decided that attacking one target would not have the desired effect. Their plan included simultaneous robberies of several jewelry stores and casinos. This was meant to create chaos and make the work of the police more difficult. The day of the great heist has arrived. Daniel and Julia, dressed as rich tourists, wandered the streets of Monaco, seemingly no different from the rest. At the appointed time, Julia activated diversionary maneuvers, hacking city cameras, causing false alarms, and even causing a small power outage in several blocks. Daniel, using his skills and ingenuity, penetrated stores and casinos, collecting all the most valuable things. Every step was calculated to the smallest detail. They acted quickly and silently, leaving no traces. In the midst of the chaos, with security and police running around the city trying to figure out what was happening, Daniel and Julia were already on their way to their hideout. They chose a discreet exit from the city, on a rented yacht that was waiting for them at the port. Their haul amounted to a staggering 500 million euros. Daniel and Julia have once again proven that they are the best in the business. But with this success came the realization that there was no turning back for them. They were searched all over the world, and any mistake could cost them their freedom. They decided to temporarily hide on an uninhabited island in the Mediterranean Sea. Here, away from the bustle and attention, they could think about their next steps. Every day was full of new plans and ideas. They knew that they could not stop, but they also understood that each new step must be even more thoughtful and careful. The world of crime remained exciting and full of possibilities for them. Daniel and Julia were ready for new challenges, but this time they were going to play by their own rules, leaving no chance for their pursuers. Daniel and Julia lived a life full of criminal adventures and uncharted roads. Their every new business was like a challenge, which they accepted with genuine passion. The criminal world became their home, and adrenaline became their constant companion. After the robbery in Monaco, they realized that their passion for this lifestyle had not faded, but on the contrary, had only intensified. Every time they conceived a new business, their hearts beat faster and their minds worked at full capacity, creating more and more sophisticated plans. Living on an uninhabited island in the Mediterranean provided them with a temporary refuge where they could enjoy solitude while preparing for new challenges. They created a real paradise for themselves, a bungalow among palm trees, the clearest sea, and a complete absence of prying eyes. However, they could not remain in the shadows for long. They were attracted by the vibrant life of big cities, where the most daring robberies could be planned and carried out. Their next goal was Rome, a city with a 1,000-year history and untold riches. In Rome, their attention was attracted by the famous jewelry exhibition, which was to be held in one of the ancient palaces. A collection of rare jewelry brought from all over the world was an ideal target. It was a real challenge, and they were ready to take it on. Daniel and Julia started with a thorough reconnaissance. Daniel infiltrated several private events under the guise of a wealthy collector, while Julia hacked digital security systems and studied the palace plans. They created a detailed map of all the passages and exits, and also developed several contingency plans. Finally, the night of the exhibition arrived. Daniel, smartly dressed in a tuxedo, mingled with the crowd while Julia monitored the cameras and security systems from her hideout to ensure the plan went smoothly. At the right moment, Daniel activated smoke bombs, causing panic and diverting the attention of the guards. He quickly collected the most valuable exhibits and, using a secret passage, disappeared from the palace. Once again, luck was on their side. They left Rome with booty valued at 300 million euros. Their reputation in the criminal world grew, and each new success only fueled their excitement. With each new business, their plans became more and more ambitious. They traveled the world, choosing the most guarded and rich sites for their operations. Paris, London, Tokyo, wherever they appeared, they left a trail of destroyed security systems and discouraged guards. Daniel and Julia enjoyed their lives. They enjoyed being on the edge, testing their skills and ingenuity while playing cat and mouse with the police and intelligence agencies. Their criminal career was full of adrenaline and thrill, and they were not going to stop. Every morning they started with new plans and ideas, discussing what new horizons they would have to conquer. For them, the criminal world became not only a way to earn money, but also a way of life that brought them real pleasure and happiness. And so their exciting and adventurous life continued, where every new day was a new challenge, and every new business was another opportunity to prove to themselves and the world that nothing is impossible for those who are ready to take risks and enjoy every minute. They were legends in the criminal world. Daniel and Julia conquered one case after another, leaving a trail of broken security systems and discouraged guards. But the more they enjoyed their life on the edge, the more pressure from international agencies increased on them. Their next destination was Hong Kong, a city that was known for its constant bustle and wealth. Here they decided to take aim at one of the most guarded buildings, the International Financial Center, where there was a safe with priceless jewelry and documents, the value of which could not be estimated. Hong Kong is a labyrinth of opportunities and obstacles. Every block was under surveillance and every building had its own security measures. Daniel and Julia knew this would be their hardest task yet, but it only fueled them. They began with careful preparation, renting an apartment overlooking the financial center and beginning to gather information about its security system. Julia immersed herself in the world of digital networks, hacking systems and studying every detail. She discovered that the building was equipped with the latest technology, including biometric scanners and artificial intelligence that analyze behavior. Daniel, in turn, studied physical security and patrol routes. The plan was complex and multi-level. First, Julia had to create diversions throughout the city to divert the attention of the police and security. Secondly, they decided to use underground communications to enter the building without being noticed. Third, Julia hacked the control system, temporarily disabling the cameras and alarms. The night of the operation arrived. Julia activated her programs, creating chaos in different parts of the city. Police and security rushed around trying to deal with false alarms. Daniel, using underground communications, entered the building and began his journey to the safe. He moved quickly and silently, avoiding laser traps and biometric scanners. When he got to the safe, Julia hacked the system, opening it. Daniel began gathering jewelry and documents, knowing they only had a few minutes before the guards realized what had happened. Suddenly, the security system began to reboot, and the guards received a signal about a break-in. Daniel had to improvise. He activated smoke bombs to create an additional distraction and quickly headed for the exit. Julia coordinated his actions, providing information in real time. They met at a pre-prepared place and fled the crime scene. Their haul was colossal. More than $500 million in jewelry and priceless documents. The Hong Kong robbery was a new triumph for Daniel and Julia, but also the riskiest case of their careers. They understood that now they would be hunted not only by the police, but also by private security agencies working for wealthy clients. They decided to temporarily lay low in one of the quiet villages of New Zealand. Here, among beautiful nature and tranquility, they could analyze their actions and prepare for new challenges. Daniel and Julia knew their journey wouldn't be easy, but they were prepared for anything. Living on the edge became their raison d'être. Every new task, every new challenge brought them pleasure and a sense of accomplishment. They knew that they could not stop, and that many more adventures and risks awaited them. The world of crime remained exciting and full of opportunity for them, and they had no intention of changing their lifestyle. Living on the edge has always been a source of adrenaline and pleasure for Daniel and Julia. But one day, everything changed. Julia began to notice changes in her body and, after several days of doubt, decided to take a test. The result was stunning. She was pregnant. This news shocked them both. Daniel and Julia were accustomed to danger, but now they faced a completely new reality. Pregnancy meant that their lives could no longer be the same as before. Responsibility for the child's future jeopardized their criminal careers and forced them to rethink many things. Daniel was confused. He had always been ready for any challenge, but now he was faced with a task for which he was not ready. Julia, despite her love of adrenaline and danger, began to think about the child's future and safety. They knew that their past lifestyle was too risky to raise a child. They decided to temporarily lay low and think about their next steps. Having moved to a small house in Novaya, Zealand, they began to plan how to cope with the new situation. Julia knew she needed to avoid stress and danger, which meant she wouldn't be able to participate in heists like she used to. Daniel took it upon himself to care for Julia, trying to keep her comfortable and safe. However, the thought that their lives would change forever haunted him. He understood that sooner or later their past might catch up with them, and they needed to be prepared for any surprises. Months passed. Julia was enjoying the peace and preparation for the birth of her baby, but Daniel couldn't just sit idly by. He began looking for ways to secure a future for his family without putting them in danger. But old habits and the desire to act did not give him rest. One day, strangers approached their house. Daniel quickly realized that these could be investigators or mercenaries working for those they had robbed. He decided to act quickly. They packed their things and left the house, heading inland. New Zealand provided them with plenty of cover, but they knew they couldn't hide forever. Julia, feeling her due date approaching, knew they needed to find a safe place. They decided to go to Australia, where they hoped to find peace and start a new life. In Sydney, they found a secluded place where they could hide for a while. Daniel got a job in a small workshop, where his skills and ingenuity were put to use in a more peaceful way. Julia prepared for the birth of her child, enjoying rare moments of peace. The birth of their daughter was a turning point in their lives. Little Emily brought light and joy to their existence, but also increased their worries and fears. They knew that their past could return, but now they had a new goal: to protect their family at all costs. Daniel and Julia knew that their criminal careers could not continue as before. They decided they had to find a new path that would allow them to provide security and a future for their daughter without putting her in danger. But giving up the old way of life was not so easy. They began planning how to use their skills and knowledge for legal and safe purposes. Daniel and Julia decided that their new life should be built on the same principles that helped them become the best in their business: resourcefulness, caution, and the pursuit of excellence. Investigators working on Daniel and Julia's case have finally received new information. They learned that the couple had changed their appearance and last names, but their current location remained unknown. This news gave new impetus to the investigation, and agents were able to narrow their search. Meanwhile, Daniel and Julia, now known as Alex and Laura Williams, were enjoying a quiet life in suburban Sydney. Several years have passed. Emily grew up and their life seemed calm and safe. Alex got a job as an electronics repairman, and Laura took care of the house and raising her daughter. They managed to integrate into the local community, avoiding unnecessary attention and carefully guarding their secret. However, they always remained on guard, knowing that their past could return at any moment. One day, Alex noticed that their house was being watched. He knew it could be an accident, but his intuition told him otherwise. They decided it was time to move again, without waiting for investigators to get on their trail. Laura prepared everything necessary for a quick departure, and they went into the interior of Australia to less populated areas. They found shelter in a small town where they rented a house on the outskirts. This time, they decided to change tactics and try to find a way to legalize their situation. Alex began working remotely, using his programming and cybersecurity skills to provide income for his family without attracting attention. Meanwhile, investigators continued to search for them around the world. They knew that Alex and Laura Williams were just one of many masks, and that the couple could be anywhere. They assembled a team of cybersecurity specialists and began monitoring the internet and databases in search of the slightest traces. Alex, realizing that they could be searched through digital traces, took additional security measures. He created complex algorithms to mask their online activity and used anonymous networks to communicate with the outside world. It gave them time, but they knew it wouldn't last forever. One day, while analyzing their situation, they decided that they needed to find a way to legalize their situation. They began to look for old connections and people they could trust. One of these people was their old friend from the criminal world, who was now leading a legal life. He helped them organize new documents and prepare for legalization. They began the process of obtaining new documents that could withstand any scrutiny. It was a risky undertaking, but they understood that this was their only chance for a normal life. At the same time, they continued to hide and change their places of residence to avoid detection. Emily grew up, and they tried to give her everything she needed for a happy childhood. Despite the constant stress and risk, they found the strength to continue fighting for their family. Every day was a new challenge, but also a new opportunity. Alex and Laura knew that their journey would be long and difficult, but they were ready for anything for the safety and happiness of their daughter. Their criminal past had left its mark, but they believed they could create a new future, free from fear and persecution. The world was full of opportunities, and they were ready to take on any challenge to protect their family and start a new life. It's been several years since Alex and Laura Williams, formerly known as Daniel and Julia, left Australia. Their desire for a normal life, despite their criminal past, led them to a new stage. They managed to legalize their documents and started life with a clean slate. However, rumors of their movements continued to spread among those who tried to find them. Rumors led investigators to China, where legends circulated about a mysterious couple living in luxury with stolen money. They were said to have settled in Shanghai, one of the most dynamic and cosmopolitan cities in the world. Daniel and Julia, now known as Chen and Li Ming, truly enjoyed the life they were able to afford due to their wealth. Their new home was a luxurious penthouse overlooking the Huangpu River in the heart of Shanghai. They led a secretive but comfortable life, enjoying luxury and attention to detail. Chen used his cybersecurity skills to open a successful data protection company that quickly captured the market. Li was involved in philanthropy, investing in various projects and helping local communities. Emily, now grown, attended one of the best international schools, receiving an education that prepared her for a bright future. She didn't know all the details of her parents' past, but she understood that they did everything possible to provide her with a happy and safe life. Investigators continued to look for them, but each time they came across new false leads and false information. Chen and Li Ming were masters of disguise, and their experience in hiding their tracks allowed them to stay one step ahead. Rumors of rich life in China continued to spread, but no investigator could find evidence of their whereabouts. Daniel and Julia enjoyed every minute of their new lives, knowing that their past was behind them. They knew that despite their best efforts, they would always remember their criminal adventures. But now, their main priority was the safety and well-being of their family. Shanghai became their new home, where they could enjoy the fruits of their efforts and take care of their daughter's future. Daniel and Julia proved that, despite all the trials and dangers, they can build a new life full of happiness and success. Second story of the criminal. Jackson Reed, the future most dangerous robber in America, was born in the dark quarters of New York. Even as a child, Jackson was an unusual child. He could spend hours looking at precious stones in the windows of jewelry stores, and his eyes would light up when he saw the sparkle of diamonds. At school, Jackson did not find friends for himself. He was always drawn to something inaccessible and luxurious. At the age of 10, while walking with his parents in Manhattan, Jackson accidentally wandered into a jewelry store. He held his breath when he saw a huge diamond on display. At that moment, a dream arose in his head, to own the rarest and most beautiful diamonds, but not as an ordinary buyer, but as a thief, capable of entering any place and taking what he considers his own. Already a teenager, Jackson began to study how security systems work, how safes and locks are broken. He read books and watched films about famous thieves and analyzed their methods. But most importantly, he developed his cunning and ingenuity. His first crime occurred at the age of 17. It was a small store on the outskirts of the city. Jackson prepared carefully. He studied the guard schedule, checked the security system. At night, when everyone was sleeping, he got inside and took several small diamonds. This was his first real feeling of victory. Every year his crimes became bolder and more sophisticated. He stole exclusively diamonds, each time proving to himself that he was the best in his field. Jackson became a legend in the underworld, respected and feared. He was crazy about diamonds, and this obsession led him further into new, risky endeavors. One day he heard about the legendary blue diamond, one of the most expensive and rare stones in the world, located in the private collection of one of the most protected mansions in America. Jackson decided that this diamond would become his main trophy. Thus began the story of America's most dangerous robber who lived for one single purpose: to possess all the most valuable diamonds in the world. Jackson Reed continued to hone his skills, becoming a true master of theft. He studied the latest technologies, hired the best security experts to understand their weak points, and was always one step ahead of the police. His name became synonymous with mystery and danger, and each new diamond stolen added another chapter to his legend. One day, in one of the prestigious jewelry stores on Fifth Avenue, a presentation of a new collection of rare diamonds took place. Among the exhibits was the famous Starlight, a unique blue diamond, the cost of which was estimated at millions of dollars. Jackson couldn't miss this chance. He carefully prepared for this case, collecting all the information about the store's security system. He studied the guards' work schedules, the location of the cells, and even the type of safe in which the jewelry was kept. The night before the presentation, Jackson, dressed in a black suit and mask, entered the building. He moved silently, avoiding cameras and using special devices to disable alarms. Having entered the main hall, Jackson discovered a safe, which by all measures should have been impenetrable. But he knew that every castle has its own weakness. After a few minutes of intense work, the safe was opened and Starlight was in his hands. The success of this theft made Jackson even more famous in the criminal world. He became the target of a hunt for all law enforcement agencies in the country, but thanks to his caution and ability to camouflage, he always remained elusive. Each new case was thought out to the smallest detail, and no one could predict his next step. Over time, Jackson began to work alone, relying entirely on his knowledge and experience. He continued to rob jewelry stores, museums, and private collections, always choosing only the rarest and most valuable diamonds. One day, he decided to leave New York and go west, where a new goal awaited him: the legendary Royal Diamond, kept in one of the most guarded mansions in Los Angeles. Jackson carefully prepared for this case, studying the plans of the mansion and the security system. He knew this would be one of the toughest challenges of his career, but his obsession with diamonds left him no choice. Having entered the mansion, he encountered unexpected difficulties, new security systems, increased security, and unforeseen circumstances. However, his ability to improvise and find a way out of the most difficult situations helped him emerge victorious again. With each diamond he stole, Jackson felt his obsession grow. He could no longer imagine his life without the shine of precious stones. They became his meaning and curse at the same time. Each new case was not only a test for him, but also a confirmation of his skill and uniqueness. Jackson Reed continued his dangerous game, challenging the whole world. His name became a legend, and his thefts became the most daring and sophisticated in history. He knew that one day it might end, but while the diamonds beckoned him with their brilliance, he was not going to stop. Jackson Reed has long realized that large, luxurious jewelry stores attract too much attention. He had many high-profile cases in his arsenal, but now he wanted something quieter, but no less valuable. He heard about a small jewelry store on the outskirts of Chicago that stocked rare and unique diamonds brought from different parts of the world. The shop belonged to an old man who was not only an experienced jeweler, but also a collector of rare stones. Jackson began preparations with a detailed study of the object. He visited the store several times under the guise of an ordinary customer, studying the arrangement of display cases, cameras, and locks. It became clear to him that, despite the small size of the store, the security was quite serious, which made the theft interesting and exciting. Having chosen the night to do the deed, Jackson began to implement his plan. He knew that the store's security system was old but still quite effective. Jackson cut off the power to the area to deactivate the alarms and cameras. In complete darkness, he, using his skills, silently entered inside. It was quiet and dark inside the store. Jackson knew he didn't have much time before the backup power came on. He quickly went to the safe where the most valuable stones were kept. Using his experience and special tools, he opened the lock in a matter of minutes. The picture he had dreamed of opened before him, dozens of rare diamonds, each of which was unique. His eyes sparkled with excitement. He quickly gathered the stones into a small bag, trying not to leave any traces. However, before leaving the store, Jackson heard a noise outside. It turned out that the old jeweler had a habit of walking around his shop even at night. Jackson quickly hid behind the display window, trying not to give away his presence. The old man entered the store suspecting something was wrong due to the power being out. Jackson watched the old man slowly approach the safe and knew he had to act quickly. He rushed to the exit, trying not to make noise, and passing the old man, ran out into the street. The backup lights outside had already turned on, and Jackson wasted no time in disappearing into the shadows. Making sure that he was not being followed, he walked away from the crime scene, disappearing into the night. In his hands was a bag of diamonds, which became another trophy in his collection. Jackson once again proved to himself that he was invincible, and each new theft only strengthened his reputation. So continued the life of Jackson Reed, a man who knew no bounds in his obsession with diamonds. Every new day brought him new challenges, and he met every new challenge with unwavering determination and skill. His legend grew as cops across the country scratched their heads trying to catch America's most elusive burglar. After successfully robbing a jewelry store in Chicago, Jackson Reed lay low for a while to avoid unwanted attention. But his obsession with diamonds did not allow him to remain idle for long. He continued to study the jewelry market, look for new goals, and plan his actions with even greater care. One day, while flipping through rare jewelry magazines, he came across an article about the famous fire diamond, which was kept in a small private museum in Savannah, Georgia. This diamond was known for its unique red hue and was one of the rarest in the world. Jackson decided that this stone should be his next trophy. He traveled to Savannah, exploring the city and museum. The museum was old but equipped with modern security systems. Jackson knew that this time he would have to use all his experience and knowledge to avoid getting caught. Over the course of several weeks, he carefully planned the robbery, visiting the museum under the guise of a tourist, taking notes and photographs. He discovered that each night the museum was guarded by only one guard and a few cameras. Jackson decided to act on the night when there was going to be a big celebration in the city, distracting the attention of most people and the police. At night, when the streets were filled with celebrating people, Jackson got down to business. He entered the museum through a window on the second floor, having previously turned off the electricity in the building. In complete darkness, he made his way to the main hall where the fire diamond was kept. The security guard, hearing the noise, headed towards the hall, but Jackson was already ready. He used a sedative to subdue the guard without harming him. He then broke open the glass box containing the diamond. Taking the gem in his hands, Jackson could not help but be amazed. He had never seen anything like it, but his joy was short-lived. At the exit from the museum, an unpleasant surprise awaited him. A police patrol attracted by a power outage. Jackson knew the only way out was to run. He got out of the building through the back entrance and rushed into the maze of narrow streets of the city. The chase was intense. Jackson used all his skills to escape his pursuers, jumping over fences and hiding in dark alleys. He managed to escape, but he understood that now the police would hunt him with redoubled force. Taking the fire diamond with him, he decided to temporarily leave America. With false documents and a new look, he went to Europe, where he planned to lie low and enjoy his trophy. In Paris, he rented a small apartment and began a new life, continuing to study precious stones and seek new goals. But his reputation preceded him. Even in Europe, his name evoked awe and respect in criminal circles. Jackson Reed remained a legend, the most dangerous and elusive diamond robber, for whom there were no insurmountable obstacles. His obsession continued to lead him forward to new heights and new adventures. Paris greeted Jackson Reed with foggy mornings and narrow streets full of history and secrets. Here he could blend in with the crowd, hide from the attention of the police, and plan his new adventures. His obsession with diamonds continued unabated, and he devoted every day to searching for information about the rarest stones in the world. One day, while walking around Montmartre, he accidentally overheard a conversation between two collectors about the legendary Black Diamond. This stone was said to be cursed, but had incredible beauty and power. It was kept in an old castle in the south of France, which belonged to an ancient aristocratic family. Jackson could not miss this chance. He was attracted not only by the value of the stone, but also by the mysticism that surrounded it. He began to collect information about the castle and its owners, finding out everything about the security system and the location of the rooms. The castle was protected and ancient, but vulnerable due to its age-related deficiencies. Jackson decided to act during the annual ball when most of the guests and security would be busy celebrating. On the night of the ball, dressed in an elegant tuxedo, Jackson entered the castle disguised as one of the invited guests. He moved confidently, mingling with the crowd, and headed towards the main staircase leading to the treasury. He knew he wouldn't have much time, and every minute counted. Having penetrated the treasury, he discovered that the Black Diamond was stored in a massive safe, equipped with a complex security system. But for Jackson, it was just another challenge. Using his tools and skills, he opened the safe and took the stone in his hands. The Black Diamond shimmered in the dim light, and Jackson felt a strange excitement, as if the stone really had some kind of power. But when he tried to leave the treasury, the alarm suddenly went off. Jackson realized that he had almost no time left. He rushed to the exit but collided with a security guard who, to his surprise, turned out to be an old friend, Vincent, with whom he began his criminal career together. Vincent didn't recognize Jackson right away, but Seeing the black diamond in his hands, he guessed who was in front of him. They exchanged brief glances, full of understanding and memories. Vincent, not wanting to betray his old friend, allowed him to leave, warning him of the path to a safe exit. Jackson ran out of the castle and disappeared into the forest, hearing sirens and screams of guards in the distance. He managed to escape, but he knew that now not only the police would be hunting for him, but also the owners of the castle, who had significant connections and resources. In Paris, he changed his appearance again and went to Amsterdam to lay low. His collection now included the Black Diamond, which became not only a trophy, but also a symbol of his unyielding will and skill. His life continued to be filled with danger and adrenaline. Jackson understood that each new theft brought him closer to an inevitable fight with the law, but he could not stop. His obsession with diamonds led him further, to new heights and new adventures. And no one knew what his next step would be, except for Jackson Reed himself, the man whose legend lived with him. In Amsterdam, Jackson Reed found temporary refuge in an old house on the outskirts of the city. He knew that his name had become too famous, and every step had to be carefully thought out. His obsession with diamonds haunted him, and new plans were brewing in his head. One of these plans was the robbery of the famous De Beers jewelry store in the center of Amsterdam. The store was famous for its collection of rare diamonds, among which stood out the Moonlight, a unique blue diamond that was considered one of the most beautiful in the world. Jackson knew it would be a difficult undertaking, but the risk and challenge only fueled his interest. He began his preparations, carefully studying the store and its security system. De Beers was protected by the latest technology, including laser sensors, armored glass, and constant video surveillance. Jackson realized that for a successful robbery, he would need not only his experience but also help. He turned to old acquaintances from the criminal world of Amsterdam and soon found two ready to help: Leo, a safe-cracking master, and Ingrid, an electronics specialist. They carefully planned every detail of the robbery, knowing that the slightest mistake could cost them their freedom. At night, when the streets of Amsterdam were empty, they got down to business. Jackson and his team entered the store through the roof, using special equipment to avoid laser sensors. Ingrid set about disabling the alarms and cameras, while Leo began opening the safe. There was tense silence inside the store. Each of them knew their role and performed it flawlessly. Soon the safe opened in front of them, and Jackson picked up Moonlight. The diamond shimmered in the semi-darkness, and Jackson could not help but admire its beauty. But just as they were ready to leave, the backup alarm system suddenly went off. The store was filled with bright light, and they heard the guards' footsteps approaching. Jackson quickly assessed the situation and made a decision. He handed the diamond to Ingrid and told her and Leo to leave through the emergency exit, while he stayed behind to distract the guards. He darted to the side, making noise and causing the guards to follow him. Jackson knew his chances of getting out were slim, but he was willing to take the risk for the sake of his friends and Moonlight. At the last moment, he found a loophole and disappeared into the sewer tunnel leading to the river. A few hours later, exhausted and wounded, he emerged on the outskirts of the city. Ingrid and Leo were waiting for him at the appointed place, and Jackson felt relieved when he saw that the diamond was safe. They decided to go their separate ways for a while so as not to attract attention, and agreed to meet later to share the spoils. Jackson changed his appearance again and moved to a small town in the south of France, where he planned to relax and lay low. But his obsession with diamonds continued to flare, and he knew he would soon be back in the game. Each new robbery strengthened his legend, making him even more dangerous and elusive. Jackson Reed continued his journey, leaving behind him a trail of the world's most valuable diamonds and leaving everyone asking themselves, what will be his next move? In a small town in the south of France, hidden from the spotlight, Jackson Reed found temporary refuge. But even here, in a quiet and peaceful place, his obsession with diamonds haunted him. Every night he thought about new possibilities, studied maps and plans, looked for information about rare and valuable stones. One day, while leafing through local newspapers, he came across an article about the golden diamond, a unique stone that was to be exhibited in the famous Louvre Museum in Paris. This diamond was known for its unusual history and rare golden hue. Jackson knew that robbing the Louvre would be one of the most daring and difficult cases of his career, but that was exactly what attracted him. He went to Paris, carefully preparing for the matter. This time he decided to work alone, relying only on his skills and intuition. Jackson knew that the security system at the Louvre was one of the most advanced in the world, and every move had to be carefully thought out. On the night of the robbery, Jackson was ready. He used his climbing skills to climb to the roof of the museum and entered through a ventilation shaft. Moving silently, he made his way to the hall where the golden diamond was kept. After disabling several security systems, he found himself in front of a display case with a stone. Jackson carefully opened the glass, being careful not to set off the alarm. His heart beat faster as he took the diamond in his hands. At that moment, he felt that his whole life, all his efforts and risks were worth it. But his joy was short-lived. A hidden alarm, which he did not know about, suddenly went off. The museum's red lights began flashing, signaling an intrusion. Jackson knew he didn't have much time. He quickly hid the diamond and headed towards the exit. Guards stood in his way, but he managed to use smoke bombs to divert their attention and escape. Having got out of the Louvre, he knew that a hunt would begin for him. Jackson hid in an abandoned building on the outskirts of Paris, contemplating his next steps. He understood that he now needed to act quickly and decisively so as not to fall into the hands of the police. Having hidden the golden diamond in a safe place, Jackson decided to temporarily hide in one of his old hideouts on the Mediterranean coast. There, he could hide until passion subsided. He knew that his name would again be on the front pages of the newspapers, but this did not frighten him. He was used to life on the edge. In the quiet and solitude of the coast, Jackson planned his next steps. His obsession with diamonds led him further, forcing him to seek new challenges and adventures. He knew that as long as he lived, his legend would live with him, and every new diamond would become part of his great story. On the Mediterranean coast, Jackson Reed found temporary refuge in an old fisherman's cottage, where he could rest and think about his future actions. Time passed, but his passion for diamonds did not fade. He continued to study rare stones, look for information about new targets, and prepare for the next heists. One quiet evening, Jackson received an unexpected message through an encrypted channel. An old friend, Vincent, with whom they crossed paths in one of the previous robberies, reported an important meeting in Monaco. Vincent hinted that this would not be just a meeting but an opportunity that should not be missed. Jackson decided to go to Monaco. He knew Vincent wouldn't call him just like that. Upon arrival in Monaco, Jackson met Vincent at a luxury hotel on the Côte d'Azur. Vincent told him about the Emperor's Diamond, one of the rarest and most expensive diamonds in the world, which belonged to an old aristocratic family and was kept in their family mansion in the center of Monaco. This diamond was not only incredibly valuable but also surrounded by mysticism and legends. Vincent invited Jackson to join forces to steal it, knowing that only with his skills this matter could succeed. Jackson agreed, realizing that this would not be just a robbery, but a real challenge to his skill. They began to carefully plan the operation, studying the mansion and its security system. The mansion was equipped with the latest security systems, including laser sensors, hidden cameras, and armed guards. Every detail of the plan was thought out to the smallest detail, and Jackson knew that this time there could be no mistake. On the night of the robbery, Jackson and Vincent acted as a unit. They entered the mansion through an underground tunnel that was once used for secret exits. Making their way to the main gallery, they encountered their first problem: unexpected changes in the security system that they were not aware of. But Jackson was prepared for such surprises. Using his skills, he quickly adapted to the situation, bypassing laser sensors and deactivating hidden cameras. Vincent broke into the safe in which the Emperor's diamond was kept. When they finally took the diamond in their hands, a feeling of triumph washed over them both. But another test awaited them at the exit. One of the guards noticed them and raised the alarm. Jackson and Vincent were forced to improvise, fighting the guards and making their way to the exit. They managed to escape at the last second, but the police were already on their trail. In the following days, Jackson and Vincent hid in different parts of Monaco, avoiding the police and trying not to attract attention. They divided the spoils and agreed to temporarily disperse in order to get lost in different countries. Jackson went to Italy, hoping to find temporary refuge there. In Italy, he found a quiet place in a small village on the Amalfi coast. Here he lay low again, analyzing his past mistakes and preparing for new adventures. His obsession with diamonds continued to grow, and he knew that new challenges and dangers lay ahead. Each new robbery made him even more experienced and elusive. Jackson Reed continued his journey, leaving behind him a trail of the world's rarest and most valuable diamonds, and leaving everyone who heard about him wondering, what will be his next move? On the Amalfi Coast, among picturesque houses and narrow streets, Jackson Reed found a temporary refuge where he could hide from the attention of the police and criminal circles. However, his obsession with diamonds did not subside, and he again began searching for information about new targets. Every day he studied news, rare collections, and rumors to find his next victim. One day, while walking along the embankment, Jackson overheard local fishermen talking about a rich American who had recently moved into one of the luxurious mansions on the hillsides. It was said that he had a collection of rare diamonds brought from the most remote corners of the world. This information interested Jackson, and he decided to find out more. For several days, Jackson observed the mansion, studying its security and the owner's routine. He learned that the American, Mr. Harrison, was a collector of precious stones and often threw private parties for selected guests. Jackson realized this was his chance. In the evening, when one of these parties was taking place at the mansion, Jackson decided to act. He changed into an elegant suit that would not attract attention, and mingling with the crowd of guests, entered inside. An atmosphere of luxury and sophistication reigned inside the mansion. Jackson noticed that security was tight, but that didn't stop him. Walking into the main hall where Mr. Harrison's collection was displayed, Jackson saw diamonds that took his breath away. Among them, the imperial diamond stood out, one of the rarest and most valuable stones in the world. Jackson knew that this stone had to be his trophy. He cautiously approached the display case, assessing the security system. Using his skills and equipment, he began to disable the alarm and open the display case. But at that moment, one of the guards noticed him. Wasting no time, Jackson acted quickly and decisively. He disarmed the guard and took the imperial diamond in his hands. The alarm went off and the house became alarmed. Jackson knew he didn't have much time. He ran out of the main hall, making his way through the crowd of guests and headed towards the back exit. But several more guards stood in his way. Using smoke bombs, Jackson created a distraction and, taking advantage of the panic, ran out into the street. The escape through the wooded slopes of Amalfi was difficult and dangerous. Jackson knew the police would be on his trail, but his experience and instincts helped him escape. He reached his hidden boat, hidden on the coast, and sailed under the cover of darkness. Sailing along the Italian coast, Jackson felt his heart racing with adrenaline. The imperial diamond was with him, and it was another triumph in his career. He knew that now his name would be even more famous, and every new day would bring new dangers. Arriving to safety on a Greek island, Jackson changed his appearance again and went into hiding. He knew his obsession with diamonds continued to lead him down a dangerous path, but he couldn't stop. Each new diamond became part of his legend, and while he was alive, his story continued. On the Greek island of Jackson, Reed spent several months in solitude, recuperating and developing new plans. But even here, far from the bustle and persecution, he could not remain idle for long. His obsession with diamonds and thirst for adrenaline did not allow him to stop. One day, while walking through a market in a small coastal town, Jackson heard a story about a mysterious diamond known as Atlantis. This diamond was unique not only for its beauty, but also for the legend that it was found on a sunken ship that was believed to be part of the lost city of Atlantis. The stone belonged to a wealthy collector from Athens who was planning to put it up for auction. Jackson immediately knew that this diamond should be his next trophy. He went to Athens, where he began collecting information about the owner of the diamond and the location of the auction. The auction was to be held in one of the most prestigious halls in the city, and security measures were at the highest level. Jackson developed a bold plan. He decided to enter the auction under the guise of a wealthy collector, which would allow him to be in close proximity to Atlantis. With the help of false documents and elaborate makeup, he turned into a respectable businessman. On the day of the auction, Jackson walked into the room with the confidence he had developed over the years. He mingled with the crowd of rich and influential people, watching the progress of the auction. When the time came to exhibit Atlantis, the hall was filled with whispers and sighs of admiration. Diamond was truly magnificent. Jackson acted quickly. While the attention of everyone present was focused on the diamond, he quietly entered the utility room where the keys to the display cases were kept. Using his experience and special tools, he opened the locks and replaced Atlantis with a skillful fake, which he had prepared in advance. Returning to the hall, he watched as the fake was sold for a fabulous sum, and then left the auction holding a real diamond in his hands. But as soon as he stepped outside, he was surrounded by security officers. Jackson realized that his plan had been exposed. He ran away, using all his experience and skills to escape his pursuers. Running through the narrow streets of Athens was tense and dangerous. Jackson used every possible cover to get away from his pursuers. Finally, he managed to hide in one of the abandoned buildings on the outskirts of the city. Inside the building, he paused to catch his breath and consider his next steps. He knew that the hunt had begun for him, and he urgently needed to leave Athens. Jackson contacted old friends who helped him organize his escape on a private yacht. After leaving Athens, Jackson went to the Caribbean, where he hoped to find temporary refuge and escape persecution. On board the yacht, he looked at Atlantis, realizing that this diamond had become another pearl in his collection. But his obsession knew no bounds, and he knew that new challenges and dangers awaited him ahead. In the Caribbean, Jackson found a secluded place on one of the uninhabited islands. Here, among the palm trees and white sandy beaches, he began to plan his next steps. His life continued to be filled with danger and adventure, and each new day brought new opportunities and challenges. In the Caribbean, among lush greenery and crystal-clear waters, Jackson Reed tried to find a little peace. But the inner fire that attracted him to diamonds did not go away. He took refuge in a small house on the beach owned by an old friend named Pablo. Pablo was a former smuggler who knew how to hide valuables and remain undetected. One morning, while enjoying the peace and view of the ocean, Jackson heard from Pablo a story about an old diamond mine on one of the nearby islands. Rare blue diamonds were once mined there, but the mine was abandoned after a series of accidents. Legend has it that the last owner of the mine hid a huge diamond, known as the Heart of the Ocean, in one of the underground tunnels. Interested, Jackson decided to go exploring. Pablo provided him with a map of the island and old equipment for underground work. The next day, Jackson took a small boat to an abandoned mine. The island was covered with dense jungle, and the mine was hidden in its depths. When Jackson reached the entrance, he felt a cold wind coming from the dark tunnels. He turned on the flashlight and, after checking his equipment, began to climb down. The tunnels were damp and gloomy, with stalactites hanging everywhere. Jackson moved slowly, guided by the old map and his instincts. Deep in the tunnel, he found an old wooden door that was closed with a massive rusty lock. Using his tools, Jackson picked the lock and went inside. The room behind the door was filled with old boxes and tools, and there was a large safe in the corner. Jackson began to open the safe using all his experience and skill. A few minutes later, he opened the safe and saw inside a brilliant blue diamond, the heart of the ocean. The stone was incredibly beautiful, and Jackson felt his heart beat faster. But at that moment, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning around, he saw a group of people, armed and clearly not intending to have a friendly conversation. At the head of the group stood a tall man with a scar on his face. It was a local crime boss named Raoul, who also knew about the heart of the ocean and had been hunting for this diamond for a long time. Raoul demanded that Jackson give him the stone, but Jackson knew that the chances of a peaceful resolution to the conflict were slim. He sharply darted to the side, trying to take cover behind the boxes, and a shootout began. Shots echoed in the narrow tunnel, and Jackson, using every opportunity, made his way to the exit. He managed to wound several of his pursuers and finally ran to the surface. The chase continued through the jungle, and Jackson knew he needed to find a way to his boat. He used all his survival skills to hide and lead his pursuers astray. Finally reaching the shore, he jumped into the boat and sailed away, leaving his enemies far behind. Returning to Pablo, Jackson hid the heart of the ocean and thanked his friend for his help. He knew that it was no longer safe to remain in the Caribbean and decided to move on to South America, where he hoped to find new adventures and challenges. Plans for new robberies were already maturing in his head, and he knew that many more dangers and unexpected turns awaited him ahead. Jackson Reed continued his path, leaving behind legends and the rarest diamonds, making his name more and more famous and mysterious. Each new step was even more risky and daring, but Jackson could not stop. His passion for diamonds and thirst for adrenaline led him forward to new heights and adventures. After the events in the Caribbean, Jackson Reed headed to South America, choosing Brazil as his new base. He decided to settle in Rio de Janeiro, one of the most colorful and vibrant cities in the world. In Rio, he could get lost among many tourists and locals, remaining unnoticed. Jackson found a cozy retreat in an old colonial house in the historic Santa Teresa neighborhood. The house was hidden among narrow streets and surrounded by dense vegetation, making it an ideal place for stealth. Here he could calmly plan his next steps and recuperate after his latest adventures. Jackson soon learned about a local legend, about the Crown Diamond, which was kept in an ancient monastery located in the Amazon jungle. It was said that this diamond once belonged to an ancient civilization and was part of a royal treasure. Legend claimed that the diamond had mystical properties and brought its owner good luck and power. Jackson couldn't resist this challenge. He began to collect information about the monastery, which was carefully guarded and difficult to access. Through his new acquaintances in Rio, he learned of an old guide named Miguel, who knew the Amazon jungle like the back of his hand. Miguel agreed to help Jackson for a generous reward. They set off, making their way through dense forests and crossing raging rivers. The journey was dangerous and exhausting, but Miguel confidently led them to their goal. Finally, after a few days, they reached an ancient monastery hidden deep in the jungle. The monastery was a majestic building, surrounded by a high wall and guarded by monks who were unaware of the treasures stored inside. Jackson and Miguel developed an infiltration plan. They decided to operate at night when security would be minimal. In the silence of the night, they made their way to the walls of the monastery and climbed them with the help of ropes and hooks. It was quiet inside, only the faint flickering of candles illuminating the corridors. They moved towards the central hall where, according to Jackson, the diamond was kept. When they reached the hall, Jackson saw the diamond on the altar surrounded by relics and ancient symbols. He carefully approached the diamond, but suddenly, a hidden trap was triggered. Alarm bells began to sound in the hall. Monks armed with ancient weapons rushed towards them. Jackson and Miguel were forced to act quickly. Miguel neutralized the monks while Jackson tried to turn off the alarm and take the diamond. Finally, he managed to grab the crown diamond and they rushed to the exit. The chase was tense, but they managed to escape from the monastery and hide in the jungle. After returning to Rio, Jackson and Miguel decided to temporarily separate. Jackson hid the crown diamond in a safe place and thanked Miguel for his help. He understood that now his name would be associated with yet another legend, and he would have to find a new refuge to avoid persecution. This time he decided to go to Argentina, where he hoped to find a quiet place to relax and plan new adventures. Jackson knew that his journey was not over yet, and new challenges and trials awaited him. His obsession with diamonds continued to lead him around the world, leaving behind him a trail of the rarest and most valuable treasures. In Argentina, he found a quiet house in the mountains where he could enjoy the beauty of nature and tranquility. But his inner fire never died down, and he began to think about the next daring heist that would be the next chapter in his legendary career. In Argentina, Jackson Reed found refuge in a quiet mountain house, but his obsession with diamonds continued. He began researching local news and rumors to find a new target. He soon learned of a wealthy businessman named Alejandro Valdez, known for his love of diamonds. Valdez often appeared at social events in Buenos Aires, showing off his luxurious collection of jewelry. Alejandro Valdez was the owner of a large construction company and was influential in business circles. He lived in a luxurious mansion on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by a high fence and protected by private security. Jackson realized that robbing such a man would not only be risky but also exciting. He began preparing for the robbery by studying Valdez's daily routine and the mansion's security system. Jackson knew that during one of his upcoming events, Valdez would wear his favorite diamond pendant, which had become a symbol of his wealth and status. This pendant was supposed to be Jackson's target. On the day of the event, Jackson changed into a smart suit so as not to attract attention. He mingled with the crowd of guests arriving at the party, which took place in one of the luxury hotels in Buenos Aires. A festive atmosphere reigned inside the hall. Guests enjoyed champagne and live music. Jackson watched Valdez closely, waiting for the right moment. He noticed that Valdez often went out onto the balcony to get some fresh air and talk on the phone. This was his chance. When Valdez once again went out onto the balcony, Jackson followed him. He used his experience and skills to silently approach the businessman. As Valdez turned to return to the court, Jackson quickly struck him with a punch that knocked him out for several minutes. Jackson took the diamond pendant from Valdez and quickly disappeared, leaving the businessman on the balcony. He knew that time was short and he needed to leave the hotel as soon as possible. Using his knowledge of the building's structure, he found a service exit and left the scene undetected. Going outside, Jackson headed to a pre-prepared car and quickly drove away towards his refuge in the mountains. His heart was beating with adrenaline as he held the precious pendant in his hands. This robbery was daring and risky, but success brought him another valuable treasure. He hid the pendant in his house and began to think about his further actions. He understood that now the police and Valdez's security would be hunting for him, and he needed to act quickly and decisively. Jackson decided to temporarily leave Argentina and go to a safer place where he could hide and plan his next steps. Jackson headed to Chile, where he hoped to find a peaceful refuge in the Andes. There, among the majestic mountains and clean air, he could rethink his actions and prepare for new challenges. His obsession with diamonds continued unabated, and he knew that more daring robberies and dangerous adventures awaited him. In Chile, Jackson found an old cabin in the mountains where he could enjoy peace and solitude. But even here he could not forget about his passion for diamonds. Plans for new robberies were already brewing in his head, and he knew that as long as he was alive, his story would continue, leaving behind a trail of the rarest and most valuable treasures. In the seclusion of a mountain cabin in Chile, Jackson Reed enjoyed the lull. His refuge was hidden among snow-capped peaks and dense forests, where he could feel safe. But his mind knew no peace. Diamonds continued to beckon to him, and he knew that he could not stay away for long. One day, while reading local newspapers, Jackson came across news about the famous Heart of Fire diamond, which was to be exhibited in the Santiago Museum. The diamond was found in a long-abandoned mine and was known for its bright red hue. The exhibition attracted the attention of not only art connoisseurs, but also influential people from all over the world. Jackson decided that this diamond would be his next target. He began planning the heist by studying the museum and its security system. Jackson knew this would be one of the most difficult cases of his career. The museum was equipped with modern security systems, including laser sensors, surveillance cameras, and 24-hour security. He spent several days visiting the museum under the guise of an ordinary tourist, studying the layout of display cases, guards, and patrol routes. Jackson developed a detailed plan and prepared the necessary equipment for the break-in. At night, when the museum was closed to visitors, Jackson began to carry out his plan. He made his way through the ventilation shafts, avoiding laser sensors and cameras. Every movement was carefully planned and calculated. Having reached the room where the fire heart was kept, Jackson began to open the protective glass. But at that moment, a hidden alarm went off, and the museum was filled with alarming sounds. Jackson knew he only had a few minutes before security arrived. He quickly grabbed the diamond and headed towards the exit. But guards stood in his way, ready to detain him at any cost. Using smoke bombs and distractions, Jackson made his way through the guards and ran outside. The chase was intense and dangerous, but his skills and experience helped him escape into the dark streets of the city. He got to a pre-prepared car and rushed towards the mountains, leaving his pursuers far behind. Returning to his hideout, Jackson hid the Heart of Fire and felt a rush of adrenaline. This robbery was one of the most daring and difficult in his career, but the success brought him a new valuable treasure. He knew that the police would now be looking for him with renewed vigor, and he needed to tread carefully. Jackson decided to temporarily hide in the mountains and consider his next steps. He understood that each new theft brought him closer to an inevitable fight with the law, but he could not stop. His obsession with diamonds continued to take him around the world, and he knew that new challenges and dangers lay ahead. One day, while walking along a mountain ridge, Jackson heard about a legend that had been passed down by local residents from generation to generation. Legend spoke of an ancient temple hidden in the jungles of Bolivia that housed Incan jewels, including a huge emerald known as the Eye of God. This emerald was a symbol of power and might, and Jackson could not resist the temptation. He began to prepare for a new expedition, collecting all the necessary maps and equipment. The journey to the temple was long and dangerous, but Jackson knew the reward was worth the risk. He left his refuge for Bolivia, where another exciting chapter in his legendary career awaited him. Making his way through the dense jungle, Jackson followed ancient signs and clues left by the Incas. The journey was full of dangers, including wild animals, poisonous plants, and impassable swamps. But Jackson was ready for anything. Finally, after several days of travel, he reached a temple hidden in the heart of the jungle. The temple was covered with moss and vines, but its grandeur and antiquity amazed the imagination. Jackson found the entrance and carefully stepped inside. It was dark and damp inside, but he felt that his goal was close. After passing through several halls and corridors, he reached the central room, where the Eye of God lay on a pedestal. Jackson carefully removed the emerald from the pedestal, but this activated hidden traps. The floor began to cave in, the walls began to shift, and Jackson realized that he only had a few seconds to get out. Using all his skills, he ran through the falling debris and escaped from the temple at the last moment. With the emerald in his hands, he rushed back through the jungle, knowing that now he would be hunted not only by the police, but also by those who knew about the Inca treasures. Returning to civilization, Jackson hid the eye of God and thought about new plans. He understood that his career was becoming more and more dangerous, but he could not stop. His passion for jewelry and thirst for adventure continued to lead him forward. After returning to civilization with the precious eye of God, Jackson Reed decided to hide for a while and rethink his next steps. He found refuge in a small settlement on the border of Bolivia and Peru, where no one knew him. Here he was able to regain his strength and develop new plans. Time passed, and Jackson again felt the itch for adventure. He became aware of an unusual businessman named Ricardo Estrada, who lived in Lima, Peru. Ricardo was known for his love of jewelry and rare diamonds, which he wore to public events. One day, Jackson learned that Estrada was going to take part in a charity ball, which would be held in his own luxurious mansion. Jackson realized that this was the perfect opportunity for another daring robbery. Jackson carefully prepared for this case, studying the mansion's security and Ricardo's daily routine. He knew he had to act quickly and accurately. On the eve of the ball, Jackson dressed in an elegant suit and went to the event under the guise of a wealthy philanthropist. His goal was simple: to steal the unique diamond that Ricardo wore around his neck as a pendant. When the ball began, Jackson mingled with the crowd of guests, watching Ricardo. The businessman was surrounded by security and attention, but Jackson was patient. He was waiting for the moment when Ricardo would retire, or at least lower his guard. After some time, Ricardo went out onto the terrace to talk on the phone. Jackson followed him, keeping at hand a special device that could temporarily jam the signals and turn off communications. He used this device to incapacitate Ricardo for a few seconds. Walking closer, Jackson quietly but decisively removed the diamond pendant from the businessman's neck. Ricardo came to his senses, but Jackson had already disappeared into the shadows. He quickly found his way to the exit, avoiding the guards. Once outside, Jackson headed to a previously prepared vehicle and left the crime scene. Returning to his refuge, Jackson felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. He managed to pull off another successful heist and now had another rare diamond in his collection. However, he understood that now the hunt would begin for him, and he needed to be even more careful. He spent the next few weeks in silence and solitude, analyzing his steps and preparing for the possible consequences. Jackson knew that his career was becoming increasingly dangerous, and every new step brought him closer to an inevitable collision with the law. But his passion for jewelry and thirst for adventure continued to lead him forward. One day, on a quiet evening, Jackson received an encrypted message from an old friend, Vincent. Vincent talked about a mysterious artifact known as the Dragon's Tear, which was kept in one of the most protected museums in Hong Kong. This artifact was not only incredibly valuable but also rich in history and legend. Jackson knew that this would be one of the most difficult and risky undertakings of his career, but the challenge was too attractive to refuse. He began to prepare for a new adventure, gathering all the necessary resources and information. Hong Kong was waiting for him, a city full of dangers and opportunities, where a new, exciting robbery awaited him. The trip to Hong Kong began with a flight, where Jackson was hiding under the guise of a businessman traveling on business. Arriving in the city, he rented an apartment in one of the crowded areas in order to get lost among the residents and tourists. He began studying the museum where the Dragon's Tear was kept, analyzing the security system and the guards' routes. Every day, Jackson visited the museum under the guise of an ordinary visitor, memorizing details and drawing up a robbery plan. He knew that he would have to act quickly and accurately to avoid falling into the hands of the police and security guards. Finally, he was ready to carry out his plan. At night, when the museum was closed to visitors, Jackson got down to business. He used his skills to disable the alarm and get inside through the ventilation shafts. Moving silently and confidently, he reached the hall where the dragon's tear was kept. Using special equipment, he opened the protective glass and took the artifact in his hands. But, as in previous times, a hidden alarm went off, and the museum was filled with alarming sounds. Jackson knew he didn't have much time. He quickly left the hall and headed for the exit, but guards stood in his way. Using smoke bombs and distractions, Jackson made his way through the guards and ran outside. The chase was intense, but his skills and experience helped him escape into the narrow streets of Hong Kong. He got to a pre-prepared car and rushed to his shelter. Returning to the apartment, Jackson hid the dragon's tear and felt a rush of adrenaline and satisfaction. He again managed to pull off a daring robbery and avoid capture. Now Jackson knew that his name would be even more famous, and a new hunt would begin for him. But his passion for jewelry and thirst for adventure continued to lead him forward. He was ready for new challenges and dangers, knowing that his legendary career was far from over. After a successful robbery in Hong Kong, Jackson Reed realized that with each new trophy, not only his collection was growing, but also the number of enemies and pursuers. Time spent in the shadows became increasingly dangerous. Jackson knew he needed to find a new refuge where he could calmly plan his next steps. He decided to travel to Japan, a country where tradition and technology harmoniously intertwine, creating unique opportunities for a man of his skills. Jackson chose a small mountain town known for its solitude and natural beauty. Here he found a small house where he could hide from unnecessary attention. But even in this calm place, Jackson could not forget about his calling. He began to study local legends and rumors about the jewelry stored in Japan. One story in particular caught his attention, the story of the samurai ruby, which once belonged to one of the most famous samurai of the Edo era. This ruby was a symbol of strength and power, and it was stolen many years ago. It was said to be kept in the private collection of a wealthy Japanese tycoon living in Tokyo. Jackson decided that this ruby should be his next trophy. He began preparing for the robbery by studying the life of the tycoon and the security system of his mansion. Jackson knew it wouldn't be easy, but the risk and challenge only fueled his interest. Having moved to Tokyo, Jackson rented an apartment near the tycoon's mansion and began watching him. He found out that the tycoon organizes an annual reception in his house, where he invites famous and influential people. Jackson realized this was the perfect opportunity to get inside. On the day of the reception, Jackson changed into a traditional Japanese costume and entered the mansion under the guise of a high-ranking guest. There was an atmosphere of luxury and sophistication inside. Jackson watched the tycoon closely, waiting for the moment when he would leave the guests. When the tycoon retreated to his private gallery, Jackson followed him. In the gallery, among many other jewels, the samurai ruby lay on a pedestal. Jackson acted quickly and decisively. Using his skills and equipment, he opened the protective glass and took the ruby in his hands. But at that moment, the alarm went off. Jackson knew he didn't have much time. He used smoke bombs to create a distraction and made his way to the exit. The security was already on its feet, but Jackson managed to get out of the gallery and hide in the crowd of guests. He got to a pre-prepared car and rushed to his refuge in the mountains. This time the chase was especially intense, but his skills and experience helped him escape his pursuers. Returning to his house, Jackson hid the samurai ruby and felt the usual satisfaction. Now Jackson knew that a new hunt would begin for him, and he needed to be even more careful. He decided to go into hiding temporarily and start planning his next steps. Each new trophy made him even more famous and dangerous, but Jackson could not stop. His passion for jewelry and thirst for adventure continued to drive him forward. One day, while sitting by the window and enjoying the view of the mountains, Jackson received an encrypted message from an old acquaintance who once helped him evade capture in Europe. The message was about an incredibly rare black diamond that was part of the collection of one of the richest men in the world and was kept in a private residence in Switzerland. Jackson knew this would be one of the hardest things he would ever do, but the challenge was too appealing. He began to prepare for a new journey, collecting information and resources. New adventures and dangers awaited him, but Jackson was ready for anything. His journey to Switzerland began with a flight, where he again hid under the guise of an ordinary tourist. Arriving in Zurich, he rented an apartment in the city center and began studying the residence where the black diamond was kept. Jackson knew that the security system would be one of the most complex, but he was ready for the challenge. He spent several weeks studying the owner's daily routine, guard routes, and camera locations. Finally, he was ready to carry out his plan. On the night of the robbery, Jackson entered the residence through an underground tunnel he found in old plans for the building. Having got inside, he began to turn off the alarm and make his way to the main hall where the black diamond was kept. Every step was carefully planned, and Jackson acted quickly and confidently. When he reached the hall, he saw a diamond on a pedestal surrounded by laser sensors. Using his equipment, Jackson carefully removed the diamond from its pedestal, avoiding activating the sensors. But just as he was ready to leave, the backup alarm system suddenly went off. Jackson knew he didn't have much time. He rushed for the exit, using smoke bombs and distractions to get past the guards. The chase was particularly intense, but Jackson managed to get out of the building and disappear into the darkness. He reached the pre-prepared transport and rushed to his shelter. Returning to his apartment in Zurich, Jackson hid the black diamond and felt a rush of adrenaline and satisfaction. After a successful robbery in Switzerland and the capture of the black diamond, Jackson Reed knew that his pursuers would become even more persistent. Each new trophy made his name more famous, and the hunt for him became more and more intense. He knew he had to be even more careful and find new ways to remain elusive. After leaving Switzerland, Jackson decided to head to Asia, where he hoped to find a new refuge and another goal. He chose Taiwan, a country with a rich history and unique opportunities for those who know how to hide and act unnoticed. In Taipei, the capital of Taiwan, Jackson found a small apartment in a busy area where he could blend in with the crowd and not attract too much attention. Several months passed, and Jackson began researching local news and rumors about the jewelry. He soon learned about a rare artifact, the Dragon Pearl, which was kept in an ancient temple on Penghu Island. This artifact was part of an ancient vault, protected by numerous traps and guards. Jackson realized that this would be one of the most difficult and interesting cases of his career. He began his preparations by studying the history of the temple and the security system. Penghu Island was known for its difficult weather conditions and remote location, making the task even more difficult. After leaving Taipei, Jackson went to Penghu Island. He found a local fisherman named Lee who knew everything about the temple and its surroundings. Lee agreed to help Jackson for a generous reward, and they began to develop a plan to infiltrate the temple. The night Jackson and Lee decided to act, a storm broke out on the island. This created additional complications, but also helped to conceal their approach to the temple. Using the maps and clues Lee provided, they made their way to the main entrance and began searching for a way inside. Inside the temple, it was dark and damp. They walked through several halls, avoiding traps and avoiding guards. Jackson felt adrenaline pumping through his veins as they approached the room where the Dragon Pearl was kept. When they reached the central hall, Jackson saw the artifact, illuminated by the dim light of the lamps. He carefully turned off the defense mechanisms and took the pearl in his hands. But suddenly, an ancient trap was triggered. The walls began to move and the floor began to collapse. Jackson and Lee rushed to the exit, trying to avoid falling into the abyss. Their path was full of obstacles, but coordinated work and skills helped them get out of the temple at the last moment. The storm was still raging, and they headed to Lee's boat to leave the island. On the way back, Jackson realized that the storm was not only an obstacle, but also their salvation. It helped hide their tracks and confuse their pursuers. Returning to Taipei, Jackson hid the dragon pearl and thanked Lee for his help. Now, with a new trophy in his collection, Jackson knew his adventures were far from over. Each new step made his legend more exciting and dangerous. He was ready for new challenges and dangers, knowing that even more complex and interesting things awaited him. But even in Taipei, he could not stay long. Word of the Dragon Ball quickly spread, and Jackson decided it was time to change locations again. His next destination was Singapore, a city known for its technology and security, making it an ideal place for new challenges. In Singapore, Jackson found refuge in one of the city's most modern and vibrant areas. He began to study local legends and stories about jewelry, and soon his attention was drawn to the story of the Star of Southeast Asia, a unique diamond that was kept in the private collection of a famous jewelry collector living in one of the most guarded skyscrapers in the city. Jackson knew this would be one of the most difficult heists of his career. He began to carefully prepare, studying the skyscraper's security system and the collector's daily routine. He had to overcome modern technology and many obstacles, but the challenge was too attractive to refuse. On the night of the robbery, Jackson made his way into the building using his skills and equipment. He bypassed numerous cameras and laser sensors, made his way through several floors, and reached the penthouse where the Southeast Asian Star was kept. Every step was carefully planned, and Jackson acted confidently and quickly. Having reached the display case with the diamond, he used special tools to open the protective glass. At that moment, a hidden alarm went off and the building was filled with alarming sounds. Jackson knew he didn't have much time. He quickly grabbed the diamond and rushed to the exit. The chase was intense and dangerous. Jackson used all his skills to evade security and leave the building. He knew that every step could be his last, but his experience and intuition helped him avoid capture. Finally, he reached the pre-prepared transport and rushed to his shelter. Returning to his hideout, Jackson hid the Southeast Asian Star and felt his usual satisfaction. He knew his legend continued to grow, and each new trophy made his story even more exciting. But even in Singapore, Jackson understood that he could not stay in one place for long. His pursuers became more and more persistent, and he needed to find new ways for his adventures. He decided to travel to Africa, where he heard about rare and unique jewelry stored in ancient temples and treasuries. Jackson Reed continued his legendary career, leaving behind him a trail of some of the world's rarest and most valuable jewels. His passion for jewelry and thirst for adventure drove him forward, and he knew that even more complex and interesting things awaited him. After a successful robbery in Singapore and the capture of the Southeast Asian Star, Jackson Reed decided it was time to head to Africa, where new challenges and opportunities awaited him. He chose South Africa, a country famous for its diamonds and gold mines. Jackson knew that here he could find new targets for his daring robberies. Arriving in Johannesburg, Jackson found shelter in one of the quiet areas of the city. He began researching local legends and rumors about the jewels. He soon learned about the famous Crown of Africa, a rare diamond that was kept in a gold mining museum located in an old mining town. This diamond was known for its unique history and enormous value. Jackson realized that this would be one of the most difficult cases of his career. He began preparing for the robbery by studying the museum and its security system. The museum was equipped with modern security systems, including cameras, motion sensors, and 24-hour security. Jackson knew he had to act quickly and accurately. He decided to act at night when the museum was closed to visitors. Jackson made his way through the ventilation system, avoiding laser sensors and cameras. Moving silently, he reached the hall where the Crown of Africa was kept. Using his skills and equipment, he opened the protective glass and took the diamond in his hands. But at that moment, a hidden alarm went off, and the museum was filled with alarming sounds. Jackson knew he didn't have much time. He used smoke bombs to create a distraction and made his way to the exit. The guards were already on their feet, but Jackson managed to get out of the building and disappear into the darkness. The chase was intense and dangerous, but his skills and experience helped him escape his pursuers. He reached a pre-arranged transport and rushed to his hideout in Johannesburg. Returning home, Jackson hid the crown of Africa and felt a rush of adrenaline and satisfaction. But Jackson knew that he couldn't stay in one place for long. The pursuers became more and more persistent, and he needed to look for new ways for his adventures. He decided to travel to Namibia, where he heard about rare and unique jewelry stored in ancient caves and treasuries. Arriving in Windhoek, the capital of Namibia, Jackson found shelter in one of the remote areas of the city. He began studying local legends and stories about jewelry. Soon his attention was drawn to the story of the Star of Namibia, a unique diamond that was kept in an ancient cave in the north of the country. This diamond was known for its beauty and mystical properties. Jackson decided that this diamond should be his next trophy. He began preparing for the expedition, collecting maps and equipment. The path to the cave was long and dangerous, but Jackson was ready for the challenge. He hired a local guide named Kofi, who knew everything about the caves and their surroundings. The journey through the desert landscapes of Namibia was grueling, but Jackson and Kofi pressed forward, following ancient signs and clues. Finally, after several days of travel, they reached a cave hidden in the mountains. The entrance was narrow and dark, but Jackson was prepared for what awaited him inside. After passing through narrow corridors and avoiding ancient traps, they reached the central room, where the Star of Namibia lay on a pedestal. Jackson carefully removed the diamond from its pedestal, but this activated a hidden trap. The floor began to cave in, the walls began to shift, and Jackson realized that he only had a few seconds to get out. Using his skills and teamwork with Kofi, Jackson ran through the falling debris and escaped the cave at the last moment. With the diamond in their hands, they rushed back through the desert, knowing that now they would be hunted not only by the police, but also by those who knew about the treasures of the cave. Returning to Windhoek, Jackson hid the Star of Namibia and thanked Kofi for his help. He understood that his name would again be on the front pages of the newspapers, and he would have to find a new refuge to avoid persecution. Jackson decided to travel to Morocco, where he heard about rare jewelry and ancient treasures hidden in desert cities and oases. Arriving in Marrakesh, Jackson found refuge in one of the ancient ryads in the Medina. He began studying local legends and stories about jewelry. Soon his attention was drawn to the story of the Heart of the Sahara, a rare emerald which, according to rumors, was kept in an ancient underground city lost in the desert. Jackson decided that this emerald should be his next trophy. He began preparations for the expedition, collecting information and equipment. The path to the underground city was full of dangers, but Jackson was ready for anything. He knew that new adventures and challenges lay ahead of him, and he was ready to face them. In Marrakech, Jackson Reed spent several weeks studying local legends and collecting information about the Heart of the Sahara. He learned that the ancient underground city where the emerald was kept had been forgotten for many generations and was considered a myth even among the locals. But rumors of untold treasures continued to exist, and Jackson was confident that he would find them. He contacted a local historian named Amir, who was one of the few who believed in the existence of an underground city. Amir provided Jackson with old maps and legends that helped him plan the route. They agreed to meet in the desert to go in search of treasure together. On the day of departure, Jackson and Amir met on the outskirts of the city. They took with them all the necessary equipment, including water, provisions, and maps. Their path lay through the hot and merciless sands of the Sahara. Jackson knew the journey would be difficult, but his obsession with jewelry and thirst for adventure carried him forward. The journey through the desert was grueling. They crossed dunes, fought sandstorms, and suffered from the scorching sun. But their determination did not allow them to stop. Finally, after several days of travel, they reached an oasis that served as a landmark on their map. Amir confirmed that they were on the right track, and they continued their journey to the supposed site of the underground city. When they reached the point on the map, it turned out that the entrance to the city was hidden under a massive layer of sand and stones. Jackson and Amir began digging, and after several hours of hard work, they discovered an ancient stone door leading down. Inside the underground city, it was dark and cool. They lit torches and began to explore the narrow corridors and halls decorated with ancient frescoes and relics. Jackson felt that the goal was close. They walked through several halls, avoiding old traps and avoiding collapses. In the central hall, illuminated by dim light, they saw an altar on which lay the heart of the Sahara emerald. The stone glowed green, reflecting the magic and mystery of an ancient civilization. Jackson carefully removed the emerald from the altar, but as soon as he did, the floor began to shift and the walls began to crumble. They rushed to the exit, trying to avoid falling debris and shifting walls. Jackson and Amir fled through narrow corridors, escaping the traps activated by the removal of the emerald. Finally, they broke out, covered in dust and sand, but with the heart of the Sahara in their hands. The return to Marrakech was no less difficult. They crossed the desert again, fighting the heat and fatigue. But Jackson knew they had achieved their goal. Returning to the city, he hid the emerald in a safe place and thanked Amir for his help. Jackson understood that his adventures did not end there. His passion for jewelry and thirst for adventure drove him forward. He knew that he could not stay in Morocco for long and decided to go to Europe, where new challenges and opportunities awaited him. Arriving in London, Jackson found shelter in one of the old houses on the outskirts of the city. Here he began to study local legends and stories about jewelry. Soon his attention was drawn to the story of the Celtic Heart, a unique ruby that was part of the royal treasures and was kept in one of the oldest castles in Scotland. Jackson knew this would be one of the most difficult cases of his career. The castle was equipped with modern security systems and was guarded around the clock, but the challenge was too attractive to refuse. He began carefully preparing for the robbery, collecting information and planning every step. On the night he decided to act, Jackson made his way into the castle through underground passages that he found in old maps. He avoided cameras and motion sensors as he made his way to the central hall where the Celtic Heart was kept. Using his skills and equipment, he opened the protective glass and took the ruby in his hands. But at that moment, a hidden alarm went off, and the castle was filled with alarming sounds. Jackson knew he didn't have much time. He used smoke bombs and diversions to get to the exit. The guards were already on their feet, but Jackson managed to get out of the castle and disappear into the darkness. The chase was intense and dangerous, but his skills and experience helped him escape his pursuers. He reached a pre-arranged transport and rushed to his hideout in London. Returning home, Jackson hid the Celtic Heart and felt a rush of adrenaline and satisfaction. Jackson Reed was not only a master of robbery, but also a virtuoso in the ability to cover his tracks. His ability to remain elusive after each case made him an almost mythical figure in the eyes of the police and the public. Every time the police tried to track him down, Jackson slipped away, leaving behind only mysterious evidence that did not provide any clues. After a successful robbery in Scotland and the capture of the Celtic Heart, Jackson knew he had to leave Britain urgently. He left false trails that led in several different directions to confuse his pursuers. He also used his contacts to create false documents and identities, allowing him to cross the border unhindered. Arriving in continental Europe, Jackson decided to head to Italy, where new challenges and opportunities awaited him. He chose Florence, a city of art and culture that was also famous for its historical treasures and jewelry collections. Jackson knew that here he could find new targets for his daring robberies. In Florence, Jackson found shelter in one of the old mansions in the city center. He began studying local legends and stories about jewelry. His attention was soon drawn to the story of the Medici Radiance, a unique sapphire that was part of the collection of one of the richest families in Italian history. This sapphire was kept in a private gallery belonging to the descendants of the Medici. Jackson carefully prepared for the robbery, studying the gallery and its security system. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but the challenge was too appealing. On the night he decided to act, Jackson snuck into the gallery through a secret passage that only he knew about. He avoided cameras and laser sensors, making his way to the hall where the Medici Radiance was kept. Using his skills and equipment, he opened the protective glass and took the sapphire in his hands. But at that moment, a hidden alarm went off, and the gallery was filled with alarming sounds. Jackson knew he didn't have much time. He used smoke bombs and diversions to get to the exit. The guards were already on their feet, but Jackson managed to get out of the gallery and disappear into the darkness. Returning to his hideout, Jackson used his track-covering skills. He left behind false evidence that pointed in several different directions, confusing the police. He also used special chemicals to destroy possible DNA and fingerprints left at the crime scene. Jackson hid the Medici Radiance in his apartment and felt a rush of adrenaline and satisfaction. He knew his legend continued to grow, and each new trophy made his story even more exciting. But even in Florence, he understood that he would not be able to stay in one place for long. His pursuers became more and more persistent, and he needed to find new ways for his adventures. Jackson decided to travel to Spain, where he heard about rare jewelry and historical treasures stored in ancient castles and monasteries. Arriving in Madrid, he found shelter in one of the ancient quarters of the city. Here he began to study local legends and stories about jewelry. Soon his attention was drawn to the story of the Royal Star, a unique diamond that was part of the royal collection of Spain. This diamond was kept in the royal palace, protected by the most modern security systems and numerous guards. Jackson knew this would be one of the most difficult cases of his career. He began carefully preparing for the robbery, collecting information, and planning every step. On the night he decided to act, Jackson made his way into the palace through underground passages that he found in old maps. He avoided cameras and motion sensors as he made his way to the central hall where the Royal Star was kept. Using his skills and equipment, he opened the protective glass and took the diamond in his hands. But as soon as he did this, a hidden alarm went off. Jackson knew he didn't have much time. He used smoke bombs and diversions to get to the exit. The guards were already on their feet, but Jackson managed to get out of the palace and disappear into the darkness. Returning to his hideout, Jackson used his track-covering skills. He left behind false evidence that pointed in several different directions, confusing the police. He also used special chemicals to destroy possible DNA and fingerprints left at the crime scene. After a successful heist in Spain and the capture of the Royal Star, Jackson Reed knew that his pursuers would become increasingly persistent. Each new trophy made his name more and more famous, and the hunt for him continued to heat up. But despite all the difficulties, Jackson could not stop. His passion for jewelry and thirst for adventure led him forward. His next destination was Paris, a city Jackson knew and loved for its rich history and art. He decided that it was here that he could carry out one of his most daring robberies, which would cement his name in the history of the criminal world. In Paris, Jackson found refuge in one of the old apartments in Montmartre, where he could quietly plan his next steps. Soon his attention was drawn to the story of the Napoleon diamond, which was kept in the private collection of a famous French aristocrat. This diamond was known for its rarity and historical value. Jackson began to prepare for this case, studying the aristocrat's daily routine and the security system of his mansion. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but the challenge was too attractive. The night he decided to take action, Jackson sneaked into the mansion through the garden using his skills and equipment. Once inside, he avoided cameras and laser sensors, making his way to the central hall where the Napoleon diamond was kept. Using his skills, Jackson opened the protective glass and took the diamond in his hands. At that moment, a hidden alarm went off and the mansion was filled with alarming sounds. Jackson knew he didn't have much time. He used smoke bombs and diversions to get to the exit. The guards were already on their feet, but Jackson managed to get out of the building and disappear into the darkness. Returning to his hideout in Montmartre, he hid the Napoleon diamond and felt a rush of adrenaline and satisfaction. But even in Paris, Jackson understood that he could not stay in one place for long. His pursuers became more and more persistent, and he needed to find new ways for his adventures. He decided to travel to Russia, where he heard about rare jewelry and historical treasures kept in ancient palaces and monasteries. Arriving in St. Petersburg, Jackson found shelter in one of the old houses on the Neva embankment. Here he began to study local legends and stories about jewelry. Soon his attention was drawn to the story of the Imperial Emerald, a unique stone that was part of the Romanov treasury and was kept in one of the oldest museums in the city. Jackson knew this would be one of the most difficult cases of his career. The museum was equipped with modern security systems and was guarded around the clock, but the challenge was too attractive to refuse. He began carefully preparing for the robbery, collecting information and planning every step. The night he decided to act, Jackson made his way into the museum through underground passages he found in old maps. He avoided cameras and motion sensors as he made his way to the central hall where the Imperial Emerald was kept. Using his skills and equipment, he opened the protective glass and took the emerald in his hands. But as soon as he did this, a hidden alarm went off. Jackson knew he didn't have much time. He used smoke bombs and diversions to get to the exit. The guards were already on their feet, but Jackson managed to get out of the museum and disappear into the darkness. Returning to his hideout, Jackson used his track-covering skills. He left behind false evidence that pointed in several different directions, confusing the police. He also used special chemicals to destroy possible DNA and fingerprints left at the crime scene. Now, having hidden the Imperial Emerald in a safe place, Jackson knew that his name would be even more famous, and a new hunt for him would begin. But his passion for jewelry and thirst for adventure continued to lead him forward. He was ready for new challenges and dangers, knowing that his legendary career was far from over. Each new robbery strengthened his reputation as the most skillful and elusive robber in the world. He knew that one day his luck might change, but for now his skill and cunning allowed him to stay one step ahead of his pursuers. Jackson Reed continued his journey, leaving behind him a trail of the rarest and most valuable jewels, turning his life into an exciting and dangerous game in which everything was at stake. Jackson Reed, the world's most elusive jewel heist, was at the peak of his career. Every successful raid, every daring robbery strengthened his legend. However, his elusiveness and skill began to attract the attention of not only the police, but also international agencies. His pursuers joined forces, and ultimately his capture became their main goal. After a successful robbery in St. Petersburg, Jackson headed to Japan, where he planned to take a break and develop a plan for the next heist. He chose Kyoto, a city rich in history and culture, where he could hide among many tourists and locals. But it was in this ancient city that his last game began. Jackson rented a small, traditional Japanese apartment in a quiet area of Kyoto. He enjoyed the peace and quiet, but could not completely relax. He felt that the hunt for him continued and that his pursuers would not retreat. His gut instinct was that something was coming. An international agency, combining the efforts of law enforcement agencies from several countries, developed a plan to capture him. They knew that Jackson was carefully hiding his tracks, so they decided to use his passion for jewelry as bait. An exhibition of rare jewels was to take place in Tokyo, including the legendary Phoenix Ruby, which, according to legend, was part of the treasures of an ancient Chinese emperor. This ruby was incredibly valuable, and the agency knew it would attract Jackson's attention. Jackson couldn't resist this challenge. He carefully studied the exhibition plan, security, and daily routine. He realized that this would be one of his most difficult robberies, but his thirst for adventure and passion for jewelry overcame caution. The night before the exhibit opened, Jackson snuck into the museum using his skills and equipment. He avoided cameras and laser sensors, making his way to the hall where the Phoenix Ruby was kept. Everything went according to plan, and Jackson had already picked up the ruby when the alarm suddenly went off. He didn't know that they were waiting for him. A team of special agents surrounded the museum, blocking all exits. Jackson tried to use his usual maneuvers, smoke bombs and diversions, but this time it was all in vain. The agency studied all of his past robberies and prepared for his tricks. The chase inside the museum was intense. Jackson rushed through the corridors, trying to find a way out, but every time he ran into agents. His heart was pounding, his adrenaline was pumping, but he knew his time was up. At the last moment, when he had almost reached the emergency exit, he was surrounded by special agents. Jackson understood that there was nowhere else to run. He raised his hands, holding the Phoenix Ruby in one of them, and surrendered. His arrest became a sensation. Jackson Reed, the world's most elusive jewel thief, has finally been caught. Police and international agencies celebrated the victory, and Jackson knew his legendary career was over. Jackson Reed, while behind bars, realized that his freedom was temporarily lost, but his mind continued to work, planning for the future. His arrest became a sensation, and for months the news was filled with stories of his daring robberies and elusiveness. Time passed and Jackson began to get used to life in prison, but he did not lose hope and continued to work on his escape plan. He knew that the best were watching him, and that the slightest mistake could cost him his life. However, his determination was unshakable. One day, during a planned visit, Jackson managed to transmit an encrypted message to his old allies. The message contained instructions and a request for help in organizing an escape. His team, loyal and experienced, sprang into action. They developed a complex plan that involved bribing several guards and using underground tunnels left over from previous centuries. The day of the escape was scheduled at a time when prison security was expected to be minimal due to a major event in the city. On the night of the escape, using all his skills and knowledge, Jackson began to act. He worked harmoniously with the guards who were on his side and moved towards the pre-prepared exit. The whole process took several hours, but he managed to make his way through the maze of tunnels and emerge to freedom. A team was waiting for him on the surface with transport ready to take him to safety. They quickly left the area and headed for a previously prepared shelter in another country. Jackson Reed is free again. Despite all the difficulties and dangers, he proved that his skill and determination are unsurpassed. He knew that now he would have to act even more carefully to avoid rearrest, but his spirit was unbroken. In a secret refuge, far from his former pursuers, Jackson began a new life. He decided that he would no longer engage in robberies, but his passion for jewelry remained. He used his knowledge and experience to become a consultant and jewelry expert, working with collectors and museums who valued his unique skills and intuition. The legend of Jackson Reed lived on, but now it became the story of a man who was able to change his destiny and find a new path. His adventures and daring heists became part of history, but Jackson himself found a way to take his talents in a new direction while remaining free and undefeated.